The snow fell in slow, whisper-thin veils over the godswood, blanketing the black water of the heart pond until its glassy surface looked like hammered steel. Beneath the ancient weirwood's blood-red canopy, Jon Snow listened to the creak of icy branches and the distant clang of hammers on Winterfell's ramparts. Dawn hovered below the horizon, smothered by the storm. Yet in the darkness something else moved, a faint tremor in the ground, a stir of wind warmer than any northern gust. Ghost's white head lifted. His ears flattened and his hackles bristled. Jon slid Longclaw from its sheath, the Valyrian steel dark as his mood, and stepped forward. A shadow cut across the moon. Jon's gaze snapped skyward. Through the swirling flakes he glimpsed a monstrous form, vaster than anything he had seen in the skies of the north, vaster even than Drogon. Wide sails of wings beat once, stirring the snow into spirals. The air smelled of ash and molten iron. The dread that had haunted him since they learned of the Night King's advance grew teeth. Torchlight flared along the battlements as sentries shouted. Another shape followed the first, slightly smaller but still colossal, then a third of near equal might. They banked north of the castle, circling, descending until their talons crushed frozen fields flat as parchment and their wings folded like the gates of some ancient, forgotten realm. Fires guttered in braziers. Men stammered at the sight of scales black as midnight, bronze gold, and pale silver-green gleaming beneath the storm's shroud. Jon's breath caught. He knew only one dragon that large, Drogon's size was nothing beside it. The beast's skull should have been resting in the bowels of the Red Keep, a relic. Yet here it crouched on Winterfell's outskirts, volcanic heat wafting from its nostrils, horns like broken towers, eyes twin furnaces of ember red. Valyrian the Black Dread. The world lurched with unreality. Ghost growled low. Jon forced himself toward the gate as horns blared and the courtyard erupted into activity. Unsullied forming ranks, northern spearmen fumbling for courage, archers stringing ice-flecked bowstrings. Drogon answered with a roar from his makeshift paddock beside the godswood, and Rhaegal beat furious wings against his chains, sensing rivals of elder blood and terrible power. Daenerys Stormborn strode from the castle with Missandei at her side, silver-white hair whipping in the wind. She wore furs and dragon-scale armor, yet the look in her violet eyes was blazing summer. When she saw the trio beyond the walls, she stopped dead, lips parting in a gasp, half wonder, half disbelief. The tallest of the shapes shifted. A figure dismounted from the neck ridges of Balerion, armored in black lacquer chased with bright crimson. A cloak of dragonhide billowed behind him, and unsheathed across his back was a sword of Valyrian steel, longer than Chet's spear, wider than ice of old. The helm he removed bore no dragon's crest. Instead it was smooth, crowned by 3 slender spikes, wrought for nothing but war and dominion. Arya Stark watched from atop the godswood wall walk, her gray eyes narrowing. "That's no White," she whispered. The man strode forward through the open gate, every footstep measured yet full of ownership, as though millennia of snow and stone had waited only for him. Jon felt the truth before he thought to deny it. Something ancient within him stirred, the blood of the wolf bending its knee. The stranger halted a sword's length before Daenerys and inclined his head, regal but not mocking. His voice rolled across the courtyard like distant thunder. "I am Aegon of House Targaryen, first of my name, King of the Undulls, the Rhoynar and the First Men, Lord of the 7 Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm. Balerion, Vhagar, and Meraxes ride with me, reborn in flesh and fire. Who speaks for Winterfell?" Daenerys drew breath as if struck. "I am Daenerys Targaryen of that same blood. We fight the dead this very night." Aegon's dark gaze flicked to Jon. "And who are you?" "Jon Snow," he replied, voice hoarse. "Called Aegon once in secret, though I would not claim it. We stand together against the Night King." The Conqueror's lips curved into something almost like amusement. "The Night King will fall. I have crossed winds and worlds to ensure it. Gather your forces. My dragons grow restless." Tyrion Lannister watched the council convene in the Great Hall, a strange company lit by sparse candles. Sansa Stark in her dark furs, Bran the Broken silent in his weirwood chair, Ser Davos grim as a cairn stone, Grey Worm in stoic vigilance, Lyanna Mormont standing small and fierce, Samwell Tarly shifting beside Gilly with a bundle of parchments. And now Aegon Targaryen, centuries dead, alive and solid with eyes like cooling lava pools. Tyrion's mind raced with possibilities, plots, and the stark terror that none of them mattered if the dead broke the walls. Aegon spoke little. His presence filled silence like a warhorn's echo. Daenerys kept stealing glances at him, wistful, wary, perhaps longing. Jon met Tyrion's gaze once. The dwarf shook his head helplessly. There was no precedent for this. The Conqueror had returned at the very hinge of history. Bran's voice cut the hush. "He comes," the boy said. "The Night King marches. He will be here before the moon climbs." Aegon rose. "Then we ride." "No," Daenerys said. All eyes turned. "We must hold the dragons for the moment of need. If they rise too soon, the Night King will see our strength and strike to kill our dragons first." "Valyrian fears no spear of ice," Aegon replied. "Nor Vhagar nor mare axes." "There is sorcery in that creature," said Melisandre, slipping from the shadows. Her ruby glowed like fresh blood. "The Night King's power is woven from the living and the dead. He commands storms and shadows. Even a dragon's fire may fail if the wielder is unprepared." Aegon's gaze hardened. "Have you stood beneath Valyrian's flames, priestess? I have razed castles to ruin and melted stone in torrents of fire. This Night King is but another petty tyrant. I broke the storms of Argilac. I bent the knees of Heron the Black. I will break the dead." The Red Woman's smile was enigmatic. "Then I pray to the Lord of Light your fire burns bright." In the courtyard, Aegon inspected the Unsullied without expression. He noted the neat ranks, the polished spears, the blank faces. "Slaves freed," Daenerys said quietly beside him. "Now soldiers sworn." He inclined his head. "Discipline is to be admired. They will hold." His words held neither warmth nor disdain. Drogon roared from nearby, chains rattling. A vibration answered from beyond the walls. Valyrian's answering bellow, primal and earth-deep. Flames licked the corners of the Black Dread's maw, hot enough that the falling snow hissed into steam before touching his scales. Vhagar, bronze and ancient, stretched her wings, and Meraxes lashed her tail, great silver-green eyes glittering with impatience. Jon approached with Ghost at his side, Theon Greyjoy behind him. "Your Grace," Jon began, faltering over the title. To call Aegon king felt both truthful and treacherous. "Speak freely," Aegon said. "Our plan," Jon swallowed. "We lure the Night King to Bran in the Godswood. If your dragons circle high, we may have surprise. Otherwise, he will know to avoid the fire." Aegon listened, unreadable. "Valyrian's shadow covers all. Surprise is an illusion, but I will consider your counsel." Daenerys laid a hand on Jon's wrist. "We fight together." Aegon's gaze lingered on their joined hands, then flicked upward. "You are allies?" Jon's cheeks flushed in the cold. "We are family, if the world allows." "Family bends the knee," Aegon said softly, almost regretful. "Family does its duty." Daenerys stiffened. Jon's grip tightened on her fingers, but neither spoke. Aegon turned away before the moment shattered. Night deepened until the sky seemed a vast tomb lid of granite. The armies amassed outside Winterfell, Northmen with patched cloaks, Vale Knights, free folk in scavenged mail, the Hound muttering curses beside Beric Dondarrion, Gendry checking his forged axes, Podrick shivering in mismatched armor. Among them moved unsullied columns, Dothraki riders stamping restless horses, even a handful of southern volunteers who had followed the Targaryen queen north. And now 3 dragons older than memory crouched at the rear, their breaths turning snow to steam. Samwell Tarly stood atop the battlements, dragonglass daggers hanging awkwardly from his belt beside Heartsbane. He watched Balerion and felt smallness crush him, yet somehow their presence steadied his heartbeat. If even death could not keep such beasts away, perhaps the living still held hope. Suddenly a horn bayed thrice in the distance. Grey Worm barked an order. Torches died. Silence crept. A dreadful hush broken only by the soft crunch of countless feet trudging through snow and the clatter of bone against rusted steel. The Night King's army appeared in the shadows beyond the trench fires. Torrents of dead, whites and whites, their eyes blue lanterns. Above them, storm clouds churned. Icy winds screamed. Jon stood near the front ranks, sword ready, ghost snarling beside him. Arya waited with her spear of dragonglass on the roofs. Theon and his Ironborn ringed Bran beneath the weirwood. Sansa watched from the battlements with Sandor at her side, fingers white on the stone. Aegon climbed Balerian's neck, melding into the night like a dark star. Vhagar and Meraxes unfurled behind him, Daenerys astride Drogon, regal unchained at last with Jon's silent blessing. 6 dragons roared, shaking Winterfell's bones. The Night King rode Viserion, shattered wings beating ragged ice. At the sight of Balerion, he halted, blue fire leaking from Viserion's jaws. For the first time, a sliver of uncertainty crossed that frozen, inhuman face. Aegon lifted Blackfire high, its edge gleaming red in Dragonfire's glow. He spoke a word in blistering Valyrian. Flames cascaded from Balerion's throat, black, shot through with veins of crimson. The trench fires ignited anew, a wall of molten fury that turned snow into a boiling moat. Yet the dead surged, climbing over burning corpses, heedless. Giants waded through flame like specters of doom. In their midst walked White Walkers, ice blades drawn, frost swirling at their feet. Daenerys angled Drogon low, torching a swath of whites. Jon led a charge with Tormund on his flank, slashing at skeletal horses. The hound split skulls with a fire-kissed axe, Barrack's flaming sword carving arcs of orange light. On high, dragon battled dragon. Viserion spat blue flame. Balerion answered with heat bright enough to blind. They collided beneath the storm clouds, claw against claw, scale against scale. Vhagar seized Viserion's torn wing, and for a moment 3 ancient monsters tumbled heedless toward the earth, snow and cinders spiraling around them. At the last instant Balerion snapped wings wide, catching the night, and hurled Viserion aside. The zombie dragon crashed beyond the walls in a geyser of ice shards. Aegon spotted the Night King soaring over the courtyard, spear of ice poised for Bran. With a wordless roar, he drove Balerion into ascent, climbing like a thrown javelin. The spear left the Night King's hand, a streak of moonlit frost. It struck Balerion's breast, shards exploding across ancient scales. The Black Dread shrieked, but did not falter. Aegon leapt from the saddle. He fell like a comet, Blackfire held two-handed. The Night King turned, drawing another spear. Before he could hurl it, Aegon's blade met him in midair. Valyrian's steel bit through armor of frozen crystal, through the thing that passed for bone, through the ancient curse that bound the creature to undeath. A burst of icy light blazed. For a heartbeat all was still. Then the Night King shattered. Shards of blue ice drifted on the wind, glimmering like stars dying. A ripple swept the battlefield. White Walkers crumbled, their screams silent. Whites collapsed like puppets with cut strings.
Giants toppled, skeletal states folded.
The storm faltered. In the quiet aftermath, snowflakes drifted through smoke and embers. Balerion landed before Winterfell's gate, chest heaving, the spear still jutting from his scaled breast, melting slowly against the furnace heat beneath. Aegon dismounted, boots crunching on blackened ice. Daenerys descended from Drogon, hair wild, cheeks streaked with soot. She looked upon Aegon, the Conqueror reborn, and then at Jon, who stood bloodied but alive among the fallen. Her heart wrenched. All she had fought for teetered on the brink of new order. Aegon approached, knees bent silently among the unsullied, Northmen, knights, free folk. Even the dragons dipped their massive heads. Balerian's rumble shook the air, a living drum of dominion. Daenerys drew herself tall. She was queen, forged in blood and fire, mother of dragons. Yet in those dark eyes she saw the weight of old Valyria, the doom that birthed her line. She saw the conquest that birthed the realm. She saw destiny. Slowly, Daenerys knelt, snow hissing to steam beneath her knees. "My king," she said, voice trembling only a little. Jon bowed his head, though his sword remained in hand. Sansa watched from the battlements, face unreadable. Arya exhaled, lowering her spear. Bran's eyes clouded as ravens circled overhead. Aegon placed a gauntlet hand upon Daenerys' shoulder. "Rise, niece," he said, though how many generations separated them none could count. "Your fire is bright. Serve by my side, and together we will forge a realm to endure beyond winter and night." She lifted her gaze. Somewhere in her soul a storm cracked, but it was not defeat she felt, only the strange dawn of a future unimagined. Overhead, dawn's first blush seeped through spent clouds. Pink light kissed the broken field, gilding the drifted dead and the living standing amidst ruin. Valyrian shook his wings, scattering ash. Vagor and mare axes settled, breath steaming in the cold light. The Battle of Winterfell was ended. The long night was broken by a flame from the past. Yet in the ragged hush that followed, new questions rose like ghosts. What realm would be built upon the ashes of the old? Whose banners would fly? Whose crowns gleam? Whose oaths bind? And as the dragons curled around Winterfell's torn walls, their vast shadows falling across the snow, the world held its breath for the reign of the Conqueror returned. Hours passed in uneasy stillness. Survivors stumbled through the corpses, seeking kin. Melisandre removed her ruby and walked into the dawn, flesh withering, purpose fulfilled. Gendry found Arya beside the Godswood, tears freezing on her cheeks as she watched Theon's body borne away. Tyrion drank alone beneath the shattered wheelhouse of a giant. Brienne knelt beside Ser Jaime, binding a wound on his arm, neither speaking of debts or vows. Within the great hall, fires roared. Aegon sat upon the high-backed chair where Robb Stark once held court, not a throne yet full of weight. Jon stood at his right, Daenerys at his left. The living gathered, lords of the north, knights of the Vale, the free folk's leaders, the queen's followers. Dragons slumbered beyond the walls, guarding with half-lidded eyes. A hush fell as Bran wheeled forward, pushed by Sam. His voice was wind in dry leaves. "You crossed time that was your grace. Do you know how or why?" Aegon studied the crippled boy. "The stars shifted, the curtain tore. I walked the black paths beneath the world and followed fire. That is all I know."
Sam swallowed.
"Prophecy, the prince that was promised. Prophesies our chains," Aegon said quietly. "I broke mine." Jon felt the room sway. He glanced at Daenerys, who stared ahead with a calm born of storms weathered. Her face was pale, but her spine straight. Sansa spoke next, voice cold steel. "The North bled for freedom. We have bent our backs to every southern king. Why should we bend to another?" Aegon's gaze was steady. "Because I freed you from death tonight. Because I will free you from the games of lesser men. Because I rule and the world obeys." "The North remembers," Sansa said. "We remember promises broken. What of them?" Aegon rose. "Then let us forge new vows upon the ashes of old. The North shall keep its customs, its king's road tolls, its lords. But kneel, and I will shield you with wings of fire." Sansa's jaw clenched. She looked to Jon. He said nothing. At last she bowed her head a fraction. Not kneeling, not yet, but the first brittle crack in winter's iron. Tyrion stepped forward, voice soft. "All of Westeros lies broken. King's Landing smolders, the Reach starves, the Ironborn raid the coast. Your grace, what realm remains for any of us?" Aegon turned, cloak swirling like smoke. "A realm of rubble," he answered. "Rubble can be built anew, with dragonfire to forge and dragonfire to defend." He lifted Blackfire, and the hall fell silent as the sword's dark edge caught the firelight and flared crimson. "This day the dead have fallen. Now we claim the living." Night settled once more, gentle now without storm. In the Godswood, Jon found Daenerys crouched before the heart tree, her palm pressed to the old white face. Snow dusted her hair like ash. "You knelt," Jon said. "I chose." Her voice was tired. "For our people to live." Jon knelt beside her. "Does it hurt so much?" She smiled faintly. "I have always bent the world to my will. Perhaps I never learned to bend myself." He took her hand. "We will shape the new world together." "Aegon shapes," she murmured. "We follow." Jon began to speak, but in the hush the weirwood seemed to listen. He fell silent, feeling Bran's unseen eyes. Across the yard, Aegon stood before Balerion, palm resting on the spear embedded in the dragon's breast. Smoke curled around his fingers, yet he did not burn. Slowly he drew the shattered spear free. The wound sizzled, closed. Such was the heat of the beast's blood. He whispered in Valyrian, and Balyrion's great eye flicked open, reflecting flame and snow and the long night's end. Far to the south, at the edge of the smoking ruins of King's Landing, Cersei Lannister looked up as the dawn sky burned red. She felt the tremor of wings, though none flew above the capital. Some instinct older than pride told her a greater fire now blazed. In that crimson light, the Iron Throne's melted stubs glinted like dragon teeth. She clenched her fists around a goblet of arbor gold, knuckles white. The game had changed, and perhaps for the first time since her childhood she tasted something close to fear. In a tower overlooking Winterfell's inner yard, Tyrion wrote by candlelight, quill scratching across parchment. Line after line of careful script detailed the impossible night. He paused, staring at the ruby wine in his cup. "History," he whispered, "is drunk on itself." Then he drank. Outside his window, shadows danced. The tall spired shadow of Winterfell, the broader hump of a sleeping dragon, the towering phantom of the Black Dread. Above them all, a new constellation shimmered, 6 points of fire where there had been but 3. The world had tipped upon its axis, and somewhere, deep beneath cooled stone and settling ash, possibility stirred. New wars, new alliances, new betrayals still unborn. For as long as men burned for power, dragons would never lack riders. But for that night, at least, the living held the dawn. And the dawn smelled not of death, but of frost turned steam under dragonfire, of weirwood sap and distant sea, of ale spilled in victory and tears shed in relief. Smelled, at last, of hope, a flick. A future glinted in Bran's eyes as he watched the first rays paint the snows pink. Some paths must yet twist, some stones must yet bleed, but one truth stood unshaken beneath the world's turning. Fire had answered ice, and fire had won. And on the battlements, Aegon Targaryen, the Conqueror, returned, looked east toward the rising sun, and for the barest breath of a moment he smiled. Snow still veiled the sky like pale gauze hours after the sun should have climbed above the ragged, frost-bitten battlements of Winterfell. Dawn had stained the broken bodies of the dead and the soot-crusted stones of the curtain wall a wan pink, but now that first fragile light had retreated behind thick gray clouds. The hush that followed victory settled over the castle like a shroud, silencing even the crows that circled listlessly overhead. No Orn solded, no Amir's hung, no dogs barked. Only the soft rasp of steel upon wet stone as shattered weapons were collected from the yard, and the low murmur of the living counting their own among the fallen. Jon Snow moved through the devastation with a hollow ache in his chest that had nothing to do with the shallow cut across his ribs or the bruising that bloomed beneath his mail. Ghost padded at his side, muzzle dark with ash instead of blood, his crimson eyes flicking warily toward every shifting shadow. Around them, scavenger fires burned, licking damp wood with feeble orange tongues as the Northmen built pyres for kin and stranger alike. Dragonglass shards glinted underfoot. A dead giant's frost-crusted beard trailed across the churned mud like the roots of a felled tree, and amid the tangle of corpses lay thin, brittle fragments of ice, the remnants of slain White Walkers now reverting to dust and memory. Somewhere behind the gods would a deeper fire roared. A pyre for Lyanna Mormont, already stacked high with spruce and birch. The smell of burning pitch and pine needles fought with the stench of blood and rot. Jon had seen men stand after impossible odds before, on the wall at Hardhome at the Bastards' Battle, but never had he witnessed the moment when hope itself felt like a stranger skulking about, unsure if it belonged among the living. The dead were defeated, yes. Yet in their place loomed uncertainty vaster than the dread they had vanquished. As he crossed the yard, he felt the eyes of his countrymen on him, not with the easy trust they had once afforded their king in the north, but with questions as cold as the wind that cut between the keep's towers. He stopped at the edge of a makeshift infirmary where Maester Wolken bent over a maimed freefolk warrior, gut wound packed with snow to slow the bleeding. Davos Seaworth handed the maester a strip of boiled linen, his own weather-lined face drawn tight. The Onion Knight straightened when he noticed Jon, nodding a silent greeting laced with exhaustion. Jon's eyes drifted past Davos to the ranks of low cots where the wounded moaned. Gendry was there, one arm bound in a sling, stubbornly refusing poppy tears. A frail old woman of the village beyond the broken Wintertown wall drank water from Arya Stark's cupped hands. Podrick Payne sat propped against a sack of grain, humming a broken song through split lips while Brienne of Tarth stitched the gash above his brow. Jon's heart twisted at the sight of them, but he forced his feet onward, across blackened snow that hissed and steamed beneath the deeper shadows cast by the 3 elder dragons sleeping in a crescent outside the shattered gate. Even at rest, Balerion radiated heat enough to melt the frozen earth in a pool half the size of Bran's new Godswood Pond. Steam rose around the black dread like breath from some slumbering volcano. The spear wound puckered his onyx scales, but molten blood had cauterized the gash from within, and Jon marveled that such a monster could bleed at all. Beyond the bulk of the ancient dragon, at the edge of the field where the last embers of the trench fire still smoldered, Jon found Daenerys bending over a dead Dothraki horse lord, palm pressed to the man's silent chest as though she might call him back by sheer force of will. Her silver-white braids had come loose in the chaos, and wind whipped strands across her face. Jon approached quietly and broke the news he knew she anticipated. The pyres are almost ready. The Northmen will burn their dead at dusk. Grey Worm is preparing the unsullied fallen for their own rites to the south of the ridge. The Dothraki, they wish for cremation beneath open sky, the way you taught them at Vys Dothrak. Daenerys did not rise. They rode into darkness for me, she whispered. For him too now. Her gaze drifted to where Balerion's shadow swallowed half the courtyard. So many of my people have died beneath northern spears, southern spears, against chains and whips and sorcerers, and they ride still, always for someone else's crown. Jon knelt beside her. Ash clung to the stubble along his jaw and turned his hair a dull gray. They ride for you, Daenerys, not for crowns. Her smile was brittle. Do they? I bent the knee. Now my claim is Ash. Only then did Jon notice the small, soot-black crown she had worn yesterday at the strategy table lying discarded in the muck. A circlet of Valyrian steel, kicked aside by the press of battle. Dawn's pink glow made its dark metal shimmer like blood drying on snow. Jon reached for it, meaning to wipe it clean, but Daenerys' hand covered his. Leave it, she said. I have no wish to claim a throne larger than the ruin we just survived. He wanted to tell her that thrones meant nothing, that she herself was the hope of thousands, but words felt thin and fragile in the thick post-battle hush. Instead, he glanced toward the great hall where he knew Aegon had summoned a council. A plume of smoke curled from the chimney, carrying the scent of new-lit hearths. The warmth of dragonfire had already seeped through those ancient walls. From the yard, one could almost believe the hall had come alive as it had not since the time of the Kings of Winter. Jon's shoulders tightened at the thought of walking back under that roof as though nothing had changed when everything had. Daenerys followed his gaze. He wants you there when the lords gather. He'll not want, he'll command. Jon's breath frosted in front of him. And the Stark in me will bristle. She laughed, a soft exhalation that held no mirth. The Targaryen in you may bristle harder. They sat in silence beneath the pale sky, the dead at their feet and the living hovering beyond reach. In that quiet, Jon thought of Ned Stark, and of the promise the old gods and the new alike seemed to demand from him every time he chose duty over love. He was weary of choosing. Come, he said at last, let's face him together. Tyrion Lannister took his place at the high table in the great hall with a goblet of watered wine that tasted like soot even before it reached his lips. Smoke from the hearth fires still clung to the rafters in lazy swirls. So thick the carved direwolves seemed to swim in cloud. Aegon sat at Robb Stark's former seat, only an oaken chair yet invested now with more authority than any iron throne. He wore no crown either, though Blackfyre leaned against the table within easy reach. The heat that radiated off the sword seemed to warp the air, or perhaps Tyrion's eyes watered from stale smoke and lack of sleep. To Aegon's right, Bran remained expressionless, as inscrutable as ever, while to Aegon's left Ser Davos stared into the middle distance, fingers tapping a restless rhythm against the handle of his knife. Grey Worm stood behind the Conqueror, spear grounded but posture taut as a drawn bow, unsullied armor newly cleaned of gore. Samwell Tarly hovered near Bran, cheeks pink at finding himself seated so close to legend. Sansa had not arrived, nor Arya. Tyrion wondered whether the sisters plotted together in some tower, or if they merely stalled to remind this up-jumped ancestor that the North was no man's to claim without her leave. He sipped the wine again, grimacing because ashes drifted across the meniscus, and found Aegon studying him with eyes like banked coals. The Conqueror's face was broad-boned, weathered by war and flame and whatever dark path had carried him here. When he spoke, his voice rumbled like distant thunder rolling along hills. "You served the dragons before?" Aegon said, no greeting, only statement. "The Mad King's daughter called you hand." "I had the honor, briefly," Tyrion answered, forcing his shoulders back. "I fear the dragons were less impressed." Aegon's mouth curved but did not soften. "You rose against your own family for her cause. I learnt young that family can be a blade one must grasp by the hilt or be cut by the edge, your grace. And now," Tyrion hesitated. Truth was dangerous, but lies smelled worse than the wine. "I serve peace. If that rides with your dragons, I will pour cups and keep parchments and do as I must." A laugh low and grating escaped the Conqueror. "Cups and parchments." He glanced at Bran, who watched the exchange with the ghost of a smile. The king who conquered Westeros knew the worth of a clever tongue. "I value yours." Tyrion bowed his head, wary of compliments. "I hope my tongue keeps its cleverness long enough to be of use." The door creaked wide then, letting a gust of winter in on a swirl of snowflakes. Jon Snow strode across the threshold, cloak billowing, Daenerys at his side like a shard of living moonlight. Her gaze swept the table, pausing only a breath upon Aegon before sliding past to Bran, to Sam, to Tyrion. Neither fire nor ice, her eyes were molten resolve. "Sister," Aegon said, voice softening by a hair's breadth. "Nephew," his gaze flickered to Jon. "Or cousin's son. Blood grows tangled over centuries." Jon gave a curt nod, refusing the point. Daenerys seated herself opposite Aegon without waiting for invitation, and Jon remained standing behind her shoulder, a wolf guarding a dragon. Tyrion felt the tension coiling like a spring. He cleared his throat. "We should begin, if we wish to outpace the rumors already sprouting faster than summer weeds." Aegon inclined his head. "You have my leave, dwarf." Tyrion eyed Davos, who only shrugged, and then Sam, who flinched at being looked to. So Tyrion turned the goblet in his hand until the wine stopped trembling. "Winterfell stands," he began, voice echoing. "But the North is hollowed. Half her lords lie dead or dying. The Vale Knights lost a third. The Unsullied have been cut near in half, though their discipline keeps it hidden. The Dothraki, what remains is a fraction of a Khalasar. If the Night King had brought even a quarter more..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Our strength is perilously thin. We beat the dead with thin strength," Davos growled. "We'll manage the living." Aegon's gaze swept the faces present. "Our next move is south. King's Landing is weak. The populace starves. Cersei Lannister holds the throne by fear alone, and fear melts before Dragonfire. We march before she regathers the Golden Company." Sansa's entrance cut short the discussion. She wore widow's black trimmed in white fox, hair bound in an intricate northern braid. Arya ghosted in behind her, eyes a steel washer, hands never far from daggers. The chamber cooled an impossible degree as she took her place beside Bran. "Forgive the delay," Sansa said, voice steady. "I was with our wounded." Aegon rose. "Lady Sansa, you are duly welcome." He waited for her curtsy. None came. She folded gloved hands at her waist and matched his stare, ice to fire. An ember of amusement sparked in the Conqueror's eyes at the insolence. "We speak of the realm," he continued, "and the realm includes the North." "The North remembers," she replied evenly, repeating her earlier warning. "And the North burns," Arya added. "If dragons decide they remember us little." Jon spoke then, stepping forward. "Enough. We have just lost thousands. The Night King is gone, but winter is not. We must feed the survivors." Tyrion seized the opening. Winterfell stores are depleted. The grain wagons from the Reach were cut off at the Trident by Lannister patrols last fortnight. "Without food, this castle will turn to cannibalism before the first buds of spring." Daenerys straightened. "The Reach is our larder. Lord Tarly's former bannermen will open their granaries when the dragons cross the neck." Sansa's lip curled. "Convenient. The Reach is 700 leagues south of starving children in White Harbor. And winter roads cannot bear wagon trains," Davos added quietly. Aegon lifted a hand. "Food comes north. Men ride south. That is the decree." His tone brooked no debate, though debate came anyway in the shape of Sansa's frown and Arya's snort. "Lady Stark," he continued, "I will leave the defense of the North to those who know this land. You will raise levies to escort grain and guard these walls while the dragons bring the war to the Lioness." Sansa inclined her head the barest degree. "You presume much authority, Your Grace." "Kings presume," Aegon said simply. Jon stepped between them. "I will go south," he declared. "Winterfell has enough Starks. The army will need a commander grounded in both north and south." Daenerys's fingers tightened on the tabletop. "I will not see you ride to war without me. You command Drogon. And Rhaegal." Jon's voice was low. "Who better to guard Aegon's flank?" The Conqueror watched their exchange with opaque interest, then gripped Blackfire's hilt. "So be it. At dawn in 3 days we fly east to White Harbor, gather ships enough for the Unsullied. The Dothraki ride down the King's Road ahead of us. Winterfell stays under the Stark banner until our return. And when King's Landing burns, we speak again of crowns." With that he rose, dismissing the council, and strode from the hall. Grey Worm followed. Sam expelled a breath. Bran's eyes rolled white, lost in some raven-born vision. Arya vanished as though swallowed by shadow. Sansa lingered a moment, meeting Daenerys's eyes across the board strewn with maps and blood-flecked dragonstones. "Your knee may bend," she said quietly, "but the North's will not." Then she turned on her heel and left. Later that afternoon the pyres were lit. 6 great mounds of timber and earth rose beyond the broken trench, each crowned with bodies wrapped in cloaks or linen or nothing at all. Ghost watched from Jon's side as the first pyre roared to life, flames leaping high enough to blister the night-dark clouds. The heat drove back the wind and turned the snow at Jon's feet into rivulets that steamed underfoot. He stood with Davos, with Tormund nursing a bandaged shoulder, with Gilly holding little Sam tight while Sam himself said the words for the dead. The Queen's Dothraki shouted skyward, long, wailing ululations that trembled in Jon's marrow. The Unsullied remained silent, as always, save for the solitary beat of a war drum that echoed through the frosted trees. Daenerys stepped forward, torch in hand, to light the second pyre. No tears glistened on her cheeks. Her grief burned too hot for water. Drogon hovered just above the flames, wings outspread, the downdraft sending sparks swirling like fireflies around her silver hair. When the third pyre caught, she whispered something in Valyrian. Perhaps a prayer, perhaps a promise. And for a heartbeat Jon saw a future in her eyes where they stood together upon a hill of bones, crowned by destiny's cruelty. A woman wailed somewhere behind the ranks. Jon looked back to see a northern wife collapsing as her husband's wrapped form slid into the pyre. Sansa knelt beside the widow, whispering comfort. Arya stood over them like a small, fierce guardian, clutching her spear of dragonglass though its use was ended. Bran's wheelchair sat unmoving beneath the weirwood, the red leaves rustling around him though no wind blew in that corner of the yard. Every sight carved new hollows in Jon's heart. At last the sixth mound blazed to its peak. The acrid smoke poured skyward, dragged by wind toward the ruins of Wintertown and beyond. Jon closed his eyes, breathing in the charred remains of friend and foe alike, letting the fire cleanse the stench of death that had soaked through his very skin. When he opened them, Aegon stood across the pyres, silhouette limned in orange light. Their eyes met above the flames, and though distance lay between them, Jon felt the pull of family, of duty, of war yet to come. A voice whispered at his shoulder, Melisandre's dulcet, distant tone, returning like a ghost despite her own ashes scattered on the dawn wind. Kings and flames, ice and prophecy. The song is never ended, Lord Snow. Only the singers change. But when he turned, the Red Woman was not there. Only the pyres and the roaring storm inside his soul. Night dragged long and sleepless. Tyrion tossed in a narrow bed in the guest tower, mind spinning with strategy. To assault King's Landing with dragons was one thing. To hold the Seven Kingdoms after its fall was another. Aegon thought like a conqueror, not a regent. Tyrion had served enough kings to know the difference. Out the narrow window, Balerian's hulking bulk glowed ever so slightly beneath the moon, the dying spear wound luminous red as a forge. Every so often the black dread shifted, tail-cutting trenches in the melting yard, and the stone tower creaked in answer. Sleep would not come. A knock sounded. Tyrion cursed softly, dragged himself from tangled blankets, and opened the door a crack. Brienne of Tarth stood without, towering, eyes shining with reflected moonlight. She carried Jaime's golden hand in a cloth bundle and placed it in his palm. "He wants you to have it," she said, voice hoarse. Tyrion blinked. "He's not dead. Resting." She managed a stiff shrug. "But he said a Lannister always pays his debts. It seemed wrong carrying a dead king's debt around. Better you hold it." Tyrion swallowed. "Thank you, Sir Brienne." She nodded and left, cloak swirling behind her. Tyrion closed the door slowly, looking down at the cold, heavy lump of gold in the cloth. He sat at the little writing desk where a sputtering candle guttered and lowered Jaime's hand onto the wood, caught the candlelight and gleamed. "What debt do I hold now, brother?" he whispered. Outside, a dragon rumbled in his sleep. 3 days later, dawn cracked over Winterfell clear and brittle. The last wisps of smoke from funeral pyres had dissipated, leaving the air oddly fresh. Frost sparkled on new buds already teasing the branches of the gods with despite lingering chill, as if even winter dared not linger after dragons laid claim. Jon stood on the battlements while the army prepared. Northmen marched in uneven lines toward the gates, their numbers sorely reduced but grim readiness shining in their eyes. Dothraki rode back and forth along the King's Road, testing the footing, braids whipping behind. Unsullied ranks moved like water, silent, efficient, utterly deadly. Ox carts loaded with whatever grain remained at Winterfell headed east to White Harbor. Sansa watched them depart, lips a thin line as Lyanna Mormont's standard, bare upon green, was passed to 2 surviving cousins to bear south in her stead. Daenerys approached Jon on the wall, white furs bright above dark breastplate worked in scales. She carried no crown still. Instead, her hair was braided in the Dothraki style, 3 thick plaits entwined with silver rings. "Balerion is fit to fly," she said without preamble. "Regal too. He's eager." Jon's breath clouded. "But I don't trust the wound. It may pain Balerion mid-flight." She said Meraxes has healed. Daenerys rep. Lied, meaning the dragon. "And Vagar's wings are strong. Aegon will ride the Black Dread. I will ride Drogon. That leaves you Regal." She tried to smile, faltered. "He loves you. I think Drogon might even trust you now." Jon glanced at her. "If I ride Regal and you Drogon, who rides Meraxes?" Daenerys' eyes fixed on the yard far below, where Tyrion scrambled to saddle a horse too tall for him while Grey Worm watched stony-faced. He hasn't said. Perhaps no one. Jon frowned. A dragon without a rider is a risk. Everything is risk. She shrugged. Aegon claims to have come through worlds. Perhaps he'll bring another rider through with a wave of his hand. Jon shook his head. I dislike magic. It never knows the cost it asks. Daenerys laid a hand on Jon's forearm. When we reach the capital, there will be choices. Be ready. I am. But truth gnawed at him. He was not ready. He was a northern bastard, half wolf, half dragon, whole in neither world. He glanced down into the yard where Aegon stood beside Blackfyre, speaking in low Valyrian to Grey Worm. As if sensing Jon's gaze, the Conqueror looked up. For an instant, the yard and wall and world fell away, and only that burning gaze existed. A silent, wordless command passed between them like the spark between flint and steel. Jon felt his knees wish to bend and locked them straight. Daenerys felt him stiffen. He bends even the unbendable. Jon tore his eyes away. King or not, he is only a man. Men ride dragons, she murmured. And men burn thrones. Footsteps sounded. Tyrion arrived, out of breath, hair wild. He leaned against the parapet and peered east where snow-dusted fields stretched toward the King's Road. Good, he puffed. I caught you. His Majesty is mounting. He prefers your grace, Jon said. Tyrion smirked. I'll call him Dragon, if it keeps my head attached. His face sobered. When he conquers the capital, he will need a hand. He will choose one who speaks plainly. Jon's brow furrowed. You assume we will conquer. Tyrion shrugged. Thrones fall. Man-made things, easy tinder for dragonflame. But ruling, that is a trickier dragon altogether. Daenerys studied Tyrion. Tell me your thoughts. Cersei has scorpions facing every approach, and Euron Greyjoy's fleet still prowls Blackwater Bay. The Golden Company can't be discounted, though Sel's words melt under heat. Tyrion's fingers drummed the ice-rimmed stone. Yet the true challenge is the city's heart. Strike too hard and every smallfolk corpse will haunt whoever wears the crown next. Strike too softly and Cersei will turn victory into her martyrdom. And you? Jon asked. What would you do? Tyrion's breath clouded. Dragons overhead, the city's gates barred, bells ringing surrender. Let the small folk see the choice is theirs. Open the gates and live, or keep them closed and burn. Trust that fear of burning outweighs loyalty. Daenerys looked away, toward the silent towers of Winterfell. Fear served my father. It did not save him. Tyrion bowed his head. Fire is a mirror. It shows kings their faces. Before more could be said, the earth trembled. Valyrian stretched wings that spanned the width of 2 mead hall roofs, beating once, twice, kicking up a hurricane of ice granules. Aegon vaulted astride, armor gleaming black and red in the newborn sun. Vhagar crouched behind him like a colossal hunting cat while Mare Axes coiled her serpentine neck to watch. Across the yard, Rhaegal hopped in impatience. Jon's heart jolted as he glimpsed green-gold eyes searching the wall. He turned to Daenerys, nodded, and together they descended the stone steps. The Conqueror raised a fist. Drums thundered, unsullied ranked before the gate, shields striking spears in unison. Dothraki ululated anew, horses pacing in rings around the dragons. The Northmen had no showy call, only the steady rhythm of boots crunching frost as they moved to formation, and that steady beat comforted Jon as he swung into Rhaegal's saddle. Grey Worm barked orders. Gate chains rattled. The King's Road beyond opened white and bare toward Moat Cailin. Aegon's voice rang out above the din, rippling with power. On this day we ride to finish what was begun in fire and ended in snow. The dead are vanquished. The living must choose their loyalties anew. For Westeros, for peace, for the realm that shall be forged stronger than swords. Ride. Valyrian leapt first, wings booming. Wind burst against Jon's face as Rhaegal followed, green blur streaking skyward. Drogon shot past in a gout of black flame, Daenerys' hair snapping behind her like a banner. Vhagar lumbered to the air, Mare Axe's last, her pale silver-green scales shimmering. Below, columns of soldiers streamed through the gate, banners whipping. The dire wolf of Stark, the lion of Lannister repurposed by Halfman, the three-headed dragon of Targaryen, the sun and spear of Dorne stitched to northern furs by some southern courtier hoping to curry favor. The living marched south upon snow-flecked ground still warmed in patches by dragonfire, leaving in their wake the charred bones of an ancient nightmare and the uncertain dawn of another. Jon looked over his shoulder one final time as Winterfell receded. Smoke from the pyres no longer rose, but in his mind he saw it still, and beneath that smoke, promises whispered beneath the heart tree to fathers remembered and sisters living, promises he could not yet fathom how to keep. He faced south again. The air above the clouds tasted of frost and sunlight and the faintest hint of ash. Beside him, Daenerys urged Drogon into a banking dive, her laughter startling and fierce on the wind, echoing across the vault of the sky. Aegon spurred Balerion forward, wings slashing through cloud, and the ancient beast roared his defiance to every kingdom yet unconquered. Far below, on a cart rolling east toward White Harbor, Tyrion Lannister pulled a ragged cloak tighter and muttered to himself, "The game begins anew and the board is aflame," and across the world, fires answered. The wind that swallowed Jon's howl of farewell rolled south with the dragons, carrying with it the acrid memory of charred bone and the sweet tang of pine sap drifting from the godswood. It scoured the ruins of Wintertown and raced down the King's Road in serrated gusts, flaying the first green shoots that dared to nose through packed snow along the verge. Between those ragged breaths of winter, the world waited, each mile of barren field and black bog holding its chill, expectant silence for the storm of wings and war that followed. Rhaegal's beating heart hammered beneath Jon's knees as they skimmed a thinning layer of cloud. The dragon's breath left vaporous contrails that gleamed gold under the new sun. Above them, Drogon led the formation, a night-colored leviathan whose wing beats warped the air in thunderous pulses. Balerion shadowed the vanguard like a mobile eclipse. His wingspan eclipsed villages in a single pass, his wake scattering crows and toppling half-frozen herricks. Vagor and Mare Axes flanked the Conqueror's mount, their bronze and silver-green bellies flashing in the pale light like living heraldry. Though the hush of height damped all sound, Jon caught the exultant cry that tore from Daenerys' throat as Drogon surged, banking east to circle the column of riders far below. He watched her cling to the spines, hair streaming behind her like a banner sewn from moonlight. For that heartbeat she looked neither queen nor conqueror, but a woman reborn in speed and flame, her laughter a bright fracture in the memory of last night's pyres. Aegon rode stiff-backed on Balerion's nape, helmless so the wind could scour his face. Jon wondered what thoughts prowled behind the Conqueror's dark gaze. Echoes of rivers crossed 3 centuries ago, or the shock of new rivers wrought by time's persistence. The smell of burnt Harrenhal stone clinging to memory, the glimmer of Old Town's high tower spearing an alien sky. Whatever ghosts he wrestled, none touched the iron set of his shoulders. Beneath the dragon stretched the armed procession, a black tide of unsullied in mirrored ranks, spears glittering. Dothraki outriders galloping ahead like scattered embers, Northmen and Vale Knights slogging in tight columns, their standards half-furled against the headwind. Behind all, rickety wagons of winter stores creaked under the weight of hope and dwindling oats. Grey Worm directed the infantry cadence like a living metronome, while Davos and Tyrion rode side by side near the command tent, one eyeing every distant tree line, the other muttering numbers under breath as if calculating the price of a realm. Through the hours, the north slid behind them. Frozen rivers surrendered to half-thawed streams. Skeletal forests wore a faint blush of budding elm. Red hillocks bulged where winter's blanket had receded, revealing last autumn's mulch. At dusk on the first day, they made camp beside the Amber Rush, its banks swollen with snowmelt that hissed when dragonfire licked new forges alight. Tents sprouted amid churned mud. Cookfires flared. Soldiers traded the numb stillness of marching for the awkward rituals of living. Binding feet, wringing socks, playing bone dice by the glow of braziers. Jon dismounted beneath a lone oak where Rhaegal settled, furling wings with a huff of gusty breath that ruffled the banner set nearby. The dire wolf of Stark quartered with the 3-headed dragon. He unsaddled the beast with rote movements honed since Dragonstone, letting his mind wander to problems too sharp for sleep. Wildfire stockpiles in King's Landing cellars, crossbows large as ballistae rumored to crest the city walls, Euron Greyjoy's galleons prowling the Blackwater, the city's million souls caught between Dragonfire and Mad Lioness. Ghost padded close, insulting every Dothraki horse by sheer presence. The direwolf bristled, not with threat but with nervous anticipation. Jon scratched between translucent ears and wondered if even the old gods could see a shape for what was coming. Daenerys found him at moonrise, her cheeks flushed from wind and a day's exhilaration. She wore no crown still, only a circlet of braided leather to keep hair from her eyes. Her furs were dusted with frost. She carried 2 mugs of spiced wine steeped with winterberries pilfered from Castle Serwyn's larders. Jon accepted one wordlessly, grateful for the spreading heat. "He pushes the column hard," she said, chin angling toward the Conqueror's distant silhouette pacing along the lines, lit by torch carriers. "Another dawn march and we'll reach Moat Cailin by midday, White Harbor the noon after. Then ships. Ships to East Watch," Jon muttered. When she glanced at him, he elaborated, "Aegon wants water between us and any northern rebellion." Her lips tightened. "My brother, or whatever branch of blood he is, sets iron in every joint of this realm. But iron bends if struck in cunning place." Jon studied her eyes, saw the curious flicker of defiance coiled behind an outward calm. "You think to strike him?" She shook her head. "Not yet, perhaps never, but I would not be ruled as a lesser queen in waiting. I offered my knee to spare lives. I did not surrender my cause." Jon drank. The wine tasted of cinnamon and grief. "Then we must earn voices at his council, share victories, make ourselves indispensable." Her laughter was brittle glass. "Indispensable conquerors are buried beneath towers of their own making. Ask Harren the Black. Or ask Aegon," Jon countered. Above them the sky hosted strange constellations, familiar stars twisted by dragonflight into patterns unseen since Valyria fell. One bright smear burned eastward, no star at all, but a flick of fire streaming from Balyrion's nostrils as the Black Dread exhaled in his sleep. Across the lazy flicker of campfires, Sam Tarly huddled with Maester Wolkan over a chest brimming with raven scrolls. Bran's wheeled chair sat inside a canvas pavilion erected at the column's heart, its entrance guarded by Arya and 2 mute Unsullied. Aegon's personal decree that the 3-eyed boy be shielded from malcontents who would slit the future's throat. Jon wondered whether that was protection or prison. He caught himself glancing toward Tyrion's corner of the camp, where the dwarf's silhouette bent over maps pinned beneath stones. A candle guttered in the shifting night wind. Davos loomed behind him, arms folded, jaw set. Their shared lamplight looked dimmer than the smallest ember on the forge, yet they plotted with the gravity of kings. Daenerys followed his gaze. "The Hand and the Smuggler. Do we trust them still?" "Trust is rationed, like grain," Jon said, "but they've proven hungry for peace. Hungry men take dangerous risks, and full men ignite thrones," she murmured, finishing her wine. She moved away toward Drogon's resting shadow, leaving Jon with his cup cooling in his glove and Ghost loping after her like pale moon spilled across camp dust. Jon watched until her cloak vanished, wondering if the space between them was measured in fate or mere steps. Morning brought drizzle that froze upon contact with steel helms. Hoarfrost clung to spear hafts. The road to Moat Cailin unwound across bleak meres, its ancient paving stones drowned beneath centuries of peat scum. Rotted watchtowers jutted like snapped ribs from black water. Yet the causeway's treacherous narrowness protected the column's flanks from ambush. Only marsh birds watched from reed islands as dragons cruised overhead, their reflections rippling across mirror-smooth pools. At Moat Cailin's crumbled gate towers they made brief halt. Jon had fought here once, retaking the stronghold from Ironborn who'd abandoned it half a decade before. He studied the broken ramparts, pocked by age more than war, and imagined Aegon's dragons perched atop, stone sentinel replaced by scaled dread. The Conqueror rode down the causeway's spine without pause, ignoring the moss-coated mammoth skull that peeked from marsh a furlong west. History meant little to him that wasn't writ in flame. Past the neck, the air grew softer, smelling faintly of clay and budding willow. Birds sang hesitant notes. No armies barred their passage. Ravens had flown ahead, announcing the alliance that slew the Night King. Small folk peered from sod huts to watch the dragons sail overhead. Some knelt in mud, some wept, some fled inside, shuttering doors against omen or deliverance. Jon's heart ached at each face, each pair of widened eyes. He had seen that look in Hardhome refugees, in Winterfell's courtyard before the long night. It was the gaze of folk who knew their fates were decided by monsters and men who rode them. On the evening of the second march, they camped near Darling Water. The sun burned red through low clouds, and Tyrion's scouts returned with conflicting tidings. Glover's men had burned new castle granaries rather than hand grain to Aegon's quartermasters. Lady Barbary Dustin sent word of her undying loyalty, but secretly quartered Bolton loyalists in Barrowton. House Reed had flooded lesser causeways, delaying the baggage train by hours. Yet at White Harbor, Lord Manderley readied his deep-keel cogs, provisioning at frantic pace, fresh fish drying in nets no sooner strung. In Aegon's command pavilion, a vast hide spire stitched from sailcloth older than recorded tariffs, arguments coiled like smoke. Grey Worm presented casualty rosters. Davos pressed for slower pace to allow harvest wagons to converge. Sansa, newly arrived by fast horse, demanded Stannis-era grain requisitions be honored lest the North starve. The Conqueror listened with an inscrutable half-smile, eyes wandering now and then to the battered map table pocked by dagger marks older than Bran's earliest vision. When debate grew heated, Bran turned his white gaze toward Aegon, and a hush rippled through the tent. The boy's voice, brittle and distant, cut the dark. The weirwoods whisper that winter's jaws unclench, yet teeth remain sharp. Aegon inclined his head in something like respect. Then we shall tread lightly over their tongues. Tyrion seized the moment to suggest forging a charter of grain redistribution. White Harbor's spring catch, Hornwood's honey reserves, Carhold's dried venison. Symbols matter, he said. Let the North witness generosity before obedience.
Lion lecture wolves ont générosité, Sansa retorted.
Better lions than dragons when it comes to famine. Tyrion returned without heat. Aegon silenced them with a raised hand. We grant the North its stores, so long as 10 ships sail south each fortnight in gratitude, laden with cured fish and grain. Grey Worm, add scribes to draft tallies. He met Sansa's eyes. The North will remember bargains kept. He dismissed the council before quarrels resumed. As lords filtered out, Jon felt Sansa's fury radiate like banked coals. She paused before him, eyes glinting. He offers crumbs, she breathed, and calls them feasts. He offers survival, Jon replied. She touched his scarred cheek, tenderness laced with pity. Always survival, never freedom. 2 dawns later the fleet hove into view, white sails straining against briny winds whipped from the narrow sea. The dragons circled overhead as if shepherding flocks of gulls. Dockhands froze mid-hauling of nets when Balerian's eclipse passed across the harbor mouth. The massive sea gate groaned open. Incoming tide swirled through limestone fangs under Manderley's walls, foam flecked with gold from sunrise. On the quays, Jon assisted Dothraki stable hands coaxing skittish horses up boarding planks into cavernous hulks reinforced with timber struts. Regal alighted on a breakwater, sending spray high as a mast. Daenerys oversaw unsullied boarding, issuing orders in High Valyrian that cracked like whip snaps across riggings. Lord Wyman Manderley, flanked by sons and grandsons stout as wine casks, waddled before Aegon to bend knee upon bubbled cobbles slick with kelp. Your most magnificent majesty, he boomed, breath whistling. White Harbor pledges tide and tally to your righteous flame. Jon glimpsed calculation in the watery eyes. Manderley had waited long for a Targaryen to restore his lineage's ancient loyalty. Aegon accepted the pledge with a nod, then turned to inspect a trebuchet perched near the eastern jetty, its throwing arm freshly tested. Winches groaned as crewmen loaded a barrel of lamp oil bound for some far king's ship. Destroy it, Aegon said. Confusion rippled. "Your Grace," the siege master stammered. "Destroy it," Aegon repeated, voice flat. "We cross the sea unchallenged. A trebuchet invites challenge." Grey worms signaled, and unsullied axes hacked bolts. The great timber collapsed in a shriek of tortured wood. Jon watched pieces splash into the harbor. Symbolism again, he realized. No siege engines where dragons take sky. Fear enough without catapults. By noon, the first cogs raised anchor, tide tugging prows toward open water. Jon stood at Rhaegal's side on the broad deck of Wraith, flagship modified by Manderley carpenters to carry dragon and rider amidship. The hull groaned under the beast's coiled bulk. Sailors whispered prayers to the drowned god and the Seven and even to the stranger, while black-garbed fire priests from Volantis chanted low flame songs on adjoining decks, having arrived 2 nights prior claiming visions that led them to the Conqueror. Balerion took wing from the foremast of Leviathan at sunset, dwarfing the ship like a fly beneath a thundercloud. Drogon and Meraxes followed, Vhagar bringing up the rear. Jon glimpsed Daenerys silhouetted against the dying sun, her outline molten, as White Harbor dwindled to a pearl behind churning spray. Tyrion found Jon leaning against a rail, cloak snapping salt through his hair. "The Citadel claims dragons loathe salt water," Tyrion observed. "Yet here we are." "Books claim many things," Jon answered. Tyrion's eyes tracked Rhaegal's gentle sway. "When we reach Blackwater Bay, the real battle begins. But politics may gut us sooner." He breathed briny air. "Sansa approaches every supper like it's a small council session. Davos fears Greyjoy ships more than the dragons. Grey Worm trusts only Unsullied. And the Conqueror himself, he speaks less each day, as though words are coins he cannot spare." "He spares flame," Jon noted. "Yes," Tyrion sighed. "Fake coin for real kingdoms." Night deepened, thick with broom. Lanterns along the fleet flickered. Somewhere above, dragons roared to one another, weaving constellations man never named. Tyrion's voice softened. "When the bells ring," he said, "listen. If King's Landing surrenders, we must stay Aegon's hand. You and the Queen both." Jon tasted the memory of smoke and blood in his mouth. "I have listened for bells before." "I know." Tyrion's eyes lingered on the distant darkness wherein the Red Keep waited. "History offers second chances rarely, Lord Snow. Let us seize this one." The voyage lasted 5 days in all, the winds eerily compliant. Some murmured the Lord of Light filled the sails. Others swore dragon wings disturbed all weather. Either way, dawn of the 6th day found masts bristling on the horizon. Euron Greyjoy's fleet, sails painted with krakens writhing around jaws of iron. The enemy lay in crescent formation across the Blackwater's mouth, blocking passage to the river beyond. Spying dragons cresting cloud, Greyjoy signaled with fiery pots launched from mangonels. Red sparks danced like fireflies in smoke. Warhorns lowed from his flagship. Silence, its deck blood-stained, crew tongueless. On the command deck of Leviathan, Aegon surveyed the blockade with a predator's patience. He wore black leather scaled to mirror Ballerion's hide, black fire sheathed across his back. Jon dismounted Rhaegal and approached. "A line of scorpions on every deck," Jon warned, "and wildfire lobbers." Aegon's smile lacked humor. "Wooden ships burn faster than wildfire boils." Daenerys joined them, Drogon's shadow stretching over the sea like omen. Her gaze locked on silence. "Euron dragged me through blood at Dragonstone. I will answer." "Then answer," Aegon said. Daenerys vaulted onto Drogon's ridge, shouting a Valyrian command. Drogon banked low over waves rippling green-black, steam curling from open jaws. In seconds he raked the first Kraken galley with a blistering torrent that ignited pitch and sailcloth alike. Flames leapt mast-top, rigging shrieked. Screams drowned beneath roar of fire meeting sea. Yet silent scorpions spoke, bolts thick as saplings arced glowing toward Drogon. One grazed his left wing, tearing sail membrane. He snarled, climbing, blood droplets hissing when they struck the sea. Rhaegal roared answer and Jon kicked him into flight, weaving through crossfire to shield Drogon's retreat. Above them Balerion descended like judgment. The Black Dread's first breath melted the prow from Greyjoy's leftmost Drummond, hull collapsing inward, seething cauldron of flame devouring the deck. Men leapt into water only to find it afire with slick of burning pitch. Then thunder cracked, not dragon fire, but a ballista bolt loosed from Silence's triple-armed siege engine. The bolt soared aflame on a contrail of sorcery green. Wildfire glass poured into the carved head, wick trailing sparks. It struck Balerion high in the neck, burying deep. For a heartbeat, the great dragon faltered. A hush spread across sky and sea alike. Then Balerion screamed. Flame erupted around the shaft, consuming wildfire before it could ignite within the wound. Molten droplets cascaded like meteor shower, hissing into waves. Aegon leaned forward, spoke a word no mortal throat should shape. Balerion's throat glowed. A beam of black and red fire lashed Silence's midships, lancing through oak and steel plating and the writhing kraken sigil. The warship split with a howl of rending timbers. Euron's laughter, mad baritone echo, carried across water even as his ship foundered, listing under a plume of emerald and orange flame. More bolts flew, but Vagor and mare axes swept down, jaws spewing sheets of heat that shattered wooden arms mid-salvo. One Kraken frigate exploded from within as Merix's talon punctured her powder kegs. Another was caught beneath Balerion's wing. The slap of scaled membrane toppled masts as though they were kindling. Greyjoy's fleet scattered, some captains cutting lines to flee up coast, others driven mad by terror steering straight into compatriots. Amid the chaos, unsullied crossbowmen on Leviathan loosed volleys at reeling foes and Dothraki archers rode pitching decks firing fire arrows. Within an hour the sea burned green and gold and scarlet. Bodies bobbed like driftwood. Rhaegal circled above, keening triumph. Jon guided him to Drogon's side, saw the ragged tear in the black dragon's wing had already begun to seal, edges cauterized. Daenerys's expression was fire-lit steel. She met his eyes across swirling smoke, nodding once victory, though tempered by pain. Aegon hovered Balerion above the conflagration, flame reflecting in his eyes. Slowly he turned east-southeast toward the mouth of the Blackwater. Ships bearing the united banners followed in his shadow through a gauntlet of floating corpses and smoldering driftwood. The blockade had become a funeral pyre. King's Landing rose before them at midday, its walls bristling with scorpion arms. The ruined September of Baelor's charred skeleton reached skyward, a crooked crown of ribs. The Red Keep's towers loomed crimson under high sun. Smoke from tanneries and cook fires wreathed the slums of Flea Bottom, yet fewer chimney plumes than usual. Hunger had emptied larders. Atop the Gate of the Gods flapped Lannister crimson banners. Faded, fringed, still defiant. Bells began to ring, not in surrender, but warning. Their clang rippled across rooftops like waves crashing stone. Small folk poured into streets, hauling carts of children and meager goods, eyes wide with terror as dragon shapes eclipsed the sun. On the river, Manderley cogs anchored astride mudflats outside Scorpion Range. Gangplanks hit sandbars. Unsullied disembarked with silent precision, forming shield walls. Dothraki poured forth, hooves splattering mud. Northern levies commanded by Lord Serwyn and Lyanna Mormont's cousins waded ashore chanting ancient war songs, the chill doom of north winds in their throats. Jon landed Rhaegal in a dry drainage basin where sweet water once trickled to keep the city's cisterns fed. Now only sludge remained. He dismounted, surveying battlements. An enormous scorpion swiveled, bolt's iron tip tracking Rhaegal's breast. Jon's hand tightened on Longclaw's leather grip. One shot could cripple. Trolling cannons on parapets had felled Viserion once. Aegon strode across cracked shale to stand beside Jon, helm clasped under arm. "We give them choice," he said, voice edged by the storm still raging beneath calm. "Bells or blood?" Daenerys joined, cloak whipping in wind stirred by Balerion's wings overhead. "Cersei values neither life nor law. She will refuse." "Then we break her," Aegon replied. Jon's gaze swept the city. He pictured children huddled behind shuttered stalls, the smell of cook fires replaced by burning flesh. He saw Davos's caution, Tyrion's plea, listen for bells. He drew breath. I will ride within arrow range, he said. I know these walls. Let them see winter's sun parley with them. Aegon's brow rose. A Stark fights with words? Words first, Jon answered. Steel after. Daenerys placed a hand on his forearm. Be swift and safe. He mounted Rhaegal anew and guided the dragon low along the riverbank until Scorpion crews atop the mud gate took aim. Rhaegal hovered just beyond bolt range, wings buffeting water, talons scraping spray. Jon cupped hands to mouth and shouted across the wind, voice straining. Lord Commander of the City Watch, open the gates, lay down arms, sound the bells, and no blood need spill. His words echoed between stone walls. He saw booted figures scurry along parapets. A herald in gold cloak stepped forward to the crenel, horn in fist. But before answer could be blown, a flash of green streaked from the red keep. Wildfire pot hurled by trebuchet arced toward Rhaegal. Jon veered. The missile sailed wide, crashing in a plume of jade fire against stacked fishing skiffs. Flames erupted, reflecting emerald in his sword's polished fuller. On gate towers, Scorpion teams loosed bolts. Rhaegal twisted away, one shaft scraping a ridge scale. Jon cursed, pulling higher. From the river, Levy Tyrion watched, face ashen. So much for peace, he whispered. Aegon's orders flew like arrows. Unsullied advanced, shields locked. Dothraki screamed across open ground, zigzagging to confound trebuchets. From the sky, the elder dragons angled into attack formations. Vhagar to the west gate, Meraxes to the Lion Gate, Drogon north to the King's Gate. Balerion reared back, a mountain flexing wings, and roared. But before flames were loosed, church bells tolled. First one, then a chorus, clanging from the distant Great September's ruin, from Baelor's half-collapsed belfry, from the riverfront sept of St. Antlers. The sound chopped through tension like axe to rope. Soldiers froze. Scorpion crews hesitated, awaiting command.
Even Dothraki reigned in confused states.
Jon felt Rhaegal's muscles coil, wanting release. He breathed, listening. Bells, bells, bells. Each peal a heartbeat. He looked toward Aegon on the ground. The Conqueror's head tilted, listening too, expression unreadable. Daenerys hovered above the red keep, Drogon's throat puffing smoke. Her eyes locked on the palace's tallest tower where Lannister banners whipped viper-tongued in high wind. Bells rang beneath. Smoke from wildfire still burned on river. On Leviathan's deck, Tyrion clenched rail so hard his knuckles whitened. Davos inhaled, relief flickering. Grey Worm, face impassive, stepped forward to slaughter ground crew who had hurled first wildfire pot. His spear pierced a surrendered man's neck. Blood fountained. A ripple. Dothraki eyes turned gleaming. Unsullied ranks tensed. Northmen saw slaughter of surrendered foes and roared in confusion. In that instant bells wavered, losing rhythm, as though the city itself knew a breath suspended between mercy and doom. Aegon raised Blackfire. All halted. Silence deeper than death held the field. Bells now clanging alone in empty air. He looked up at Balerion. The Black Dread's mouth opened, molten breath simmering behind teeth like charred towers. Flames licked edges of ancient tongue. Jon shouted, words lost to wind, as he saw what decision hardened behind Aegon's eyes. In that tenuous pause, Daenerys cried, voice tearing the sky, no! But Aegon shot a single glance at her, and whatever plea lived behind her lips faltered beneath the Conqueror's will. He swung Blackfire down. Balerion's breath erupted in a column of black and red, incinerating scorpion nests on the gate of the gods. Stone exploded, parapets disintegrated. Fire washed over gate yard, charring Lannister spearmen in half-armor to silhouettes on charred wall plaster. The shockwave rolled through avenues, toppling vendor stalls. Jon spurred Rhaegal between Balerion and the still-ringing bells, rage flaring. Stand down, he bellowed. His cry joined panicked screams rising from the city. Rhaegal's wings battered wind, stirring ash and soot. Below, Grey Worm shouted Valyrian commands. Unsullied charged, spears lowered. Dothraki raced through breached gate, ululations fading into butcher's work. Northmen hesitated, then followed, some at Sansa's earlier orders to guard civilians, others hungry for vengeance after years of war. Daenerys hovered, heart breaking within ribs. Drogon's wrath snarled at leash. Bells continued, a chorus out of step with slaughter. Tyrion watched and wept. Davos barked to levies to hold discipline, to no avail. Jon guided Rhaegal down before Aegon, ash swirling. "Stop this!" he roared, dismounting. Aegon met him calm as dying stars. "The lioness hides behind walls. Walls must burn, and those that harbor her treason pay. They surrender," Jon shouted. The bells rang. "So rang bastards' drums once," Aegon answered, eyes fixed on inner keeps. "And Harren's men cried mercy. Mercy is forged in fire." Jon's fists clenched. He remembered Hardhome's children screaming, remembered Daenerys' tears over King's Landing once. He felt prophecy coil, a prince chosen. He drew Longclaw. Aegon watched, uninterested. "Will you unsheathe against your blood, nephew? Is a city of liars worth the tide of Dragonfire?" Jon looked at flames climbing spires, heard distant wails. He saw unsullied spears impaling surrendered watchmen. He felt Rhaegal's hot breath, ready to defend. And he thought, a second chance. He raised Longclaw point down, planted it in fractured paving. "There is honor in mercy." Aegon's laugh was distant thunder. "There is victory in fear." Daenerys landed Drogon beside them, wind scattering embers. She slid from saddle, eyes brimming with impossible grief. She placed a hand on Jon's arm, then stepped before Aegon. "Call them back," she said. Her voice shook but did not break. "We can end this with a throne unburnt." Aegon studied her, something soft flickering. Regret? Affection? Memory of sisters slain by Dornish spears? Whatever gentleness existed, it died behind a blink. He shook his head. "The realm is born anew in fire," he said. "As it was once, so shall it be again." Daenerys drew a breath like the first, like the last. "Then I cannot follow." Silence. Flames crackled. Bells clanged on those some faltered, melting from heat. Grey Worm's spear cries echoed. The red keep's towers shimmered behind waves of rising heat. Aegon's hand touched Blackfire's hilt. "You would defy me? I would defend them," she said, "and defend what I became to free them." Behind her Drogon rumbled, pupils narrowing to inferno slits. Jon stepped forward, but Daenerys raised her other hand, stopping him. Aegon's eyes hardened. "Stand Azide." "No," she said, voice a whisper swallowed by roar of distant conflagration, yet somehow louder than any bell. Time fractured. Jon felt ghosts of Winterfell, of Targaryen blood, of Night's Watch oaths binding his heart. Rhaegal stalked closer, wings mantling protectively. Bells ceased ringing. The largest cracked under heat, dropping silent. Aegon drew Blackfire. Its edge shimmered with captured flame. Jon moved, interposing blade to blade, Longclaw singing free. The steel's rippled lines glinted, reflecting devastation. He stood between conquering uncle and defying aunt, feeling the fate of kingdoms balance on twin points of Valyrian steel. "Not another step," he said. Daenerys inhaled, tears cutting clean tracks through ash on cheeks, but pride straightened her spine. Aegon's gaze flicked to Jon's sword, then to Daenerys, then to dragons pacing behind them. Calculations danced. He raised Blackfire in salute. "So be it," he murmured. Above them Balerian's wings boomed, stirring an inferno's breath. Drogon answered with rolling snarl, dodging sparks swirling. Rhaegal braced, green eyes blazing. And in King's Landing streets below, blood met flame, the cries of surrender drowned by the new chorus of war. War between conquerors, war among dragons, war for the soul of Westeros. Thus the bells fell silent, surrendered to the unrelenting hymn of fire and steel. Smoke twisted between the shattered teeth of the Gate of the Gods. roiling up to meet the iron-gray sky as though some unseen hand stirred both soot and cloud into one boiling cauldron. Beneath that murk the riverfront quaked with the clash of steel and the crack of flaming timber, every heartbeat punctuated by a scream, by the thud of a falling scorpion bolt, by the hiss of green fire as yet another pot of wildfire shattered against the broken quay. In the tremor of that chaos, Jon Snow stood facing Aegon Targaryen, black fire drawn and glimmering like a sliver of night pulled into the waking world. Behind Jon, Daenerys steadied her stance, one palm pressed to Rhaegal's warm scales, the other hovering near Drogon's ridged neck as if the pulse between her fingers and the dragon's thrumming blood might anchor her to a single course. Time compressed to the hush of 3 held breaths. Aegon's eyes burned lidless over the cross-hatching of scars that webbed his cheeks. Wind swept through the gap where the gate once stood proud, ruffling the black leather of his jerkin, carrying with it the mingled odors of charred flesh, pitch smoke, and the salt of half-boiled sea spray. Jon tasted that wind and tasted defeat in it if he flinched now. Behind him the bell at the September of Baelor's ruin gave out a final, cracking clang, its tongue warped by heat until even supplication melted into silence. "You raise a child's sword," Aegon said, voice low yet trembling with the drum inside the city walls, "and bear it against your king." "I raise a Stark's honor," Jon answered, the growl roaring up from someplace deeper than lungs. "And bear it against slaughter." Aegon's lips thinned. He glanced past Jon to Daenerys, his gaze softening by a hair the width of a raven's quill. "Sister, we have given them chance. One blow more, and the lioness scurries from her den. Then peace." Daenerys shook her head, eyes glistening. "Peace on what pyre?" They rang the bells. "The city is yours." "The city," Aegon corrected, "is mine when the last lion's standard drops, when the people kneel to a throne unchallenged. Fear binds faster than admiration." "And yet fear shatters," Jon cut in. "Hardhome taught me, fear breaks. Only mercy builds what lasts." "Mercy loosed at wrong hour invites blades in the back," Aegon replied. "Would you trade 10,000 small folk now for 10 million yet unborn who might feast beneath banners of peace?" "The unborn cannot weigh your scales," Daenerys said. "Only the living burn." Aegon's jaw flexed. Flames licked broken battlements overhead, scorpion bolts alight, fired haphazardly by panicked Lannister crews. One shaft whistled down to embed in earth between Aegon and Jon, ash scattering across their boots. The Conqueror did not flinch. His eyes narrowed upon the red-enameled veins. He lifted Blackfire by the bitten leather of its grip and rested the dark blade along his shoulder, a gesture both casual and fatal. "My crown is forged of choice lain behind me," he said, voice tight. "Yours, sister, lies in choice yet ahead. Join me. Stand aside, nephew. Let the realm be reborn clean." Daenerys stepped forward. Every ember, every anguished cry riding the wind seemed to crackle beneath her boots. "I bent the knee once for life. Bend now. End this." A line furrowed the Conqueror's brow. "I bend to none." The city's roar crescendoed. Unsullied shields broke a street barricade with a metallic thunderclap, a Dothraki Iraq split skull almost musical in its wet report. Distant towers in Flea Bottom caved under the pressure of green flames. Children's wails flooded the air with the dread of 1,000 ghost bells. Jon saw within Aegon's eyes the death of compromise and knew Talking's last arrow had been loosed. He drew Longclaw fully, turning side on, blade in Langort guard. Rhaegal crouched, neck snaking toward Blackfire in silent menace. Drogon's tail lashed, the gust from his leathery wings sending spirals of ash dancing between the combatants. "Then it ends here," Jon said. Aegon's answering smile was bleak victory. He shifted his weight, and sparks leapt from Blackfire's edge as if sword whispered secrets to the charged air. Before the first strike, shadows fell. Balerion plunged from Cloudbank, wings beating thunder. The ground fountained dust as his rear talons slammed earth behind Aegon, cutting Jon from flank approach. Simultaneously Vhagar banked overhead, tail scything, sending debris skittering. Such raw presence pressed upon lungs, upon hearts. In that pressure, battle lines warped or, for one heartbeat, vanished. Jon's gaze flicked around searching for vantage, but ground shook, horses shrieked, and vantage stank of burning pitch. Daenerys barked high Valyrian. Rissesi vestry. Drogon's roar answered. He shot skyward, banking to flank Valyrian's mass, jaws steaming. Rhaegal followed instinct and blood, chasing after his brother, leaving Jon momentarily alone on churned soil. Steel versus dragon and man, but not alone. Out of choking haze strode Grey Worm, spearpoint dark with blood not yet dried. Unsullied poured behind him, marching line across line to encircle the personal combat grounds. Jon's heart sank. Aegon summoned his elite as shield wall.
Spears lowered in unison, tips glittering kwarrelbright in scattered daylight.
Grey Worm's eyes locked upon Jon. No anger, only implacable obedience. Then Arya Stark ghosted from rubble behind that formation, slipping between shifting shields like a wraith. In one hand she held the staff of dragonglass that once felled wights upon Winterfell's snowy graves. In other, the slim edge of a Valyrian dagger glinted. She moved unseen by the Unsullied, unseen even by Grey Worm's sharp periphery, until she crouched at the hinge between two shield brothers and braced to strike. Jon glimpsed her only when she caught his eye and nodded, that wolfish grin she wore before carving names off her list. He breathed once, then everything shattered. Valyrian reared, exhaling a jet of molten dusk that carved a gouge across the inner curtain of the city wall, toppling centuries-old merlins as though made of soft tallow. Drogon dived in answer, flames spewing in retort, deflecting Valyrian's stream into upward arc that splashed heat upon clouds, turning them amber. The two colliding gouts roared like locked titans, steam bursting outward where fire met cooler air. Rhaegal swooped from behind Vhagar, claws raking her bronze flank. The older dragon shrieked, banking hard. Her wings hammered tidal gales onto scorpion crews along King's Gate ramparts, tossing them like rag dolls. Bolts fired wildly skyward, black lines lost among swirling cinders. In the shadow of these storms, Jon lunged at Aegon. Blackfire and Longclaw met in lightning burst, Valyrian steel screaming an ancient war song. Sparks peppered Jon's cloak. Aegon's strength rattled Jon's arms. The Conqueror fought with brutal economy, every stroke heavy as a maul despite the sword's balance. Jon pivoted, sliding aside to riposte for Aegon's exposed flank. Yet the older man caught the feint, twisting wrist to parry and shoved Jon back 3 paces. Grey Worm barked order. Unsullied tightened the ring, but Arya struck then. The dragonglass staff jabbed up beneath Grey Worm's right pauldron, glancing along mail to punch breath from him, while her dagger flashed for his thigh. He recoiled, spear sweeping low. She vaulted backward, momentum carrying her out of thrust line. The distraction rippled confusion through first ranks. One Unsullied turned, presenting shield edge to rear instead of Jon. In that heartbeat Jon whirled and carved Longclaw across spear shafts, slicing 3 apart before they could realign. Sansa's bannermen lunged through gap, Serwyn men, dust and spears, hoarse with cries of, "For the North!" They collided with Unsullied ring. Steel screeched on bronze. Disciplined formation wavered, then fractured under two-front pressure. Arya slipped through, blades snaking for hearts, leaving twin fountains of red behind shields. Aegon bellowed something guttural. Jon met renewed assault. Blackfire overhead cut downward, angled for shoulder cleave. Jon raised crossparry, sliding blow aside though elbow numbed from impact. He countered with upward cut, testing, then pivot cut for knee. Aegon half-turned, letting strike glance lamely off Greaves, that fraction of moment he used to ram pommel towards Jon's temple. Jon ducked, toe hooking behind Aegon's boot to off-balance him, but the Conqueror was too grounded, weight rooted like tower footings. He riposted, slice across air that shaved threads from Jon's sleeve. Around them battle snarled. Dothraki charged through broken gate, Arrak's cleaving surrendering gold cloaks. Grey Worm regained stance and drove spear point through Serwyn Retainer's chest. Tyrion, on rampart walkway, waved frantically for horns to signal cease. Ignored. Davos seized a torch, hurling it at Scorpion Operator, drawing bead on Daenerys. The bolt misfired, soared sky to vanish useless beyond city. And the city itself changed. Smoke luminous from afternoon sun shining through watery haze. The clang of small folk shutters banging as they fled deeper into alleys. It felt as though King's Landing exhaled last breath. Beneath Red Keep, Cersei Lannister watched from balcony, hands gripping stone so hard knuckles whitened. Beside her, Qyburn muttered of crumbling towers and collapsed tunnels. Cersei's eyes remained fixed on dragons wrestling above her city. Part wonder, part terror, mostly cold calculation. She saw Conqueror's black beast locked with pretender queens. She saw green flames devour Beggar's Row. She heard the bells no longer ring, and she smiled a thin slice. On the field, Jon's muscles burned. Aegon fought with ferocity of younger man and technique honed across unknown timelines. Jon slid under Crosscut, seeking opening under Conqueror's guard, and jammed pommel into Aegon's ribs. Grunt of pain. Jon pressed advantage, short thrust aimed quick for hip. Aegon intercepted with mailed gauntlet, twisting wrist. Pain exploded along Jon's fingers, sword almost jarred loose. Aegon slammed shoulder, sending Jon stumbling. He stepped in, Blackfire raised for killing sweep. But Drogon roared directly overhead, shadows blotting daylight. Downwash knocked both men onto knees. A wall of black flame burst past. Torching cluster of Lannister crossbowmen crouched on burned wagons. The heat wave rolled across duelists, popping seams in Jon's gambeson, blistering exposed skin. Aegon hissed, raising arm to shield face. Jon pushed up, saw opportunity. He lunged, Longclaw streaking for Aegon's unprotected left thigh. The strike landed, slicing greave strap, steel-parted flesh. Aegon staggered, blood dark against black trousers. He pivoted, sweeping sword in a defensive arc that forced Jon to retreat 2 steps. Arya darted behind Aegon, dagger up for kidney plunge. But Grey Worm intervened, spear but cracking against her wrist. Dagger skidded away. Arya cartwheeled back, catching staff. Grey Worm pressed relentless assault, jabbing. She spun, deflecting with haft, but distance now separate from duel. Above them, Vagor and Regal clashed again. Bronze jaws clamped onto green wing, tearing membrane. Regal shrieked, spiraling. Jon's heart lurched. He spared half glance, saw his dragon tumble toward river, then recover near water, blood trailing into air like ribbon. Fury stoked deeper. He redoubled attack. Rapid feints high, low, mid, stepping inside Aegon's longer reach. The Conqueror parried, but footwork slowed. Wound hampered movement. Jon felt tide shift, yet Aegon's voice rang sudden, Valyrian cry of command. Valyrian, locked in aerial grapple with Drogon, twisted free and dived. Jon sensed shadow and dove to side. A second later, a plume of searing flame washed the ground where he'd stood. Earth glazed into black glass. Shockwave hurled bodies, unsullied, Northmen, dying Scorpion crew, scattering like dice across board. Longclaw clattered from Jon's grasp as he rolled, cloak smoking. Valyrian's head snapped back, jaws gaping for second breath. But Drogon slammed into him side-on, resting muzzle skyward. Their bodies crashed to earth with shudder felt through bedrock. Dust geysered, screams trembled. Daenerys clung to Drogon's spines, hair whipping, shouting battle orders to the sky. Flames tangled above their riders' heads like banner streamers caught in high wind. Jon scrambled to knees, searching debris for Longclaw. Blackfire loomed, Aegon rising again though left leg dragged. He raised sword in both hands, stalking. Jon braced, fists curling though empty. A whistle split air. Jon glimpsed glint, Arya's Valyrian dagger skittering over churned earth toward him. He seized hilt, rolling under Blackfire's downward arc, blade bit ground where he'd knelt. Jon thrust upward, dagger tip punched into Aegon's inner arm beneath mail sleeve. Blood spurted. Aegon roared, elbowing Jon away. Jon crashed against half-melted mortar, lungs stinging. Aegon swayed, blood dripping. His gaze throbbed with volcanic fury and dawning disbelief that this scruffy nephew drew a king's blood. He lifted Blackfire, blade trembling not from fear but exhaustion. High overhead bells ignited, literally combusting as Drogon's stray burst enveloped the belfry. Molten bronze rained across rooftops, pattering like apocalyptic hail. The thunderous clang ceased forever. Aegon advanced again, but now Tyrion appeared through smoke, face blackened, hands cupped around war horn he'd found. He blew. The note quavered ragged, the horn cracked, but sound carried over carnage. Some unsullied paused, Dothraki wheeled. Davos raised green standard signifying ceasefire attempt. Yet Grey Worm, locked with Arya, hurled spear, catching her shoulder. She tumbled. Davos lunged to intercept, knocking Grey Worm aside before killing thrust. Amid swirl Jon rose. Aegon faltered. Daenerys urged Drogon between them, using Dragon's chest as living barricade. She slid to ground, soot-smeared, eyes luminous. Enough! Aegon's lip curled. Enough ends kingdoms. There is no kingdom left if walls become tomb, she retorted. She pointed to sky, to Vhagar limping, to Regal bleeding, to Balerion wounded.
Dragons die tot.
He breathed heavy, looking beyond at chaos. Northmen dragging wounded children from fires, unsullied stabbing at hidden crossbowmen in doorways, wildfire pockets erupting unpredictable. His city. In that brittle pause, a single arrow hissed from parapet. Lannister archer desperate. It struck Drogon's exposed flank. The black dragon bellowed, spitting flame in reflex. Blast seared across ground, catching ranks of gold cloaks but also licking near Aegon. He flinched, stumbled, wounded leg failing. Jon sprang, dagger raised, but Daenerys intercepted, palm on Jon's chest. No, she pleaded. Jon froze. He stared at Conqueror ragged, sword lowered, blood saturating jerkin. Killing blow begged. Yet Daenerys' eyes begged harder. Mercy. Aegon sensed this. He drew shallow breath. End me then, wolf. Prove mercy shape of steel. Jon dropped point. Yield. The word fell between them like dropped helm. Aegon barked laugh grim as ravens. I yield to none. Behind him Balerion groaned, trying to stand. The spear scar in chest reopened, blood hissing. Drogon glared, nostrils flaring brimstone. Vhagar circled overhead, wings labored. Meraxes perched on far parapet, silver-green eyes wary. Tyrion clambered over rubble. Your Grace, he called, voice hoarse from smoke. Look about. The lioness flees through secret tunnels even now. King's Landing is ash if you strike again. Rule the hearts that remain, not the bones. Aegon's gaze drifted to Red Keep. On balcony, he saw flash of gold hair vanish into tower door, Cersei withdrawing. His lips twisted. Grey Worm hobbled into circle, spear haft splintered, blood streaking brow. The city resists, he said, eyes only on Daenerys. Give order. We finish. Daenerys shook head. No more. Unsullied commander's jaw tightened, but he nodded once, steps retreating. Aegon straightened with will alone. I will not barter with traitor queen sheltered by rebel wolves. Jon spoke soft but firm. You bleed. Your dragons bleed. Day will soon turn and you'll hold nothing but smoke. Yield the sword. Let council decide her fate. Council of who? Aegon rasped. Kneeling wolves? Broken lions? Clever dwarves? Of the living, Tyrion answered. Of those you mean to rule. For the first time, Aegon's gaze flickered uncertain. Blood loss painted lips blue. Valerion's wings drooped. Even a dread's breath has limit. Daenerys stepped forward, closing distance until their armor plates brushed. She reached for Blackfire's hilt. Aegon's fingers twitched around leather, but he allowed her grasp. Slowly, together, they lowered blade point to earth. City noise hushed, not silent, but muted like waves beyond walls. Dragons ceased their roars, weary throats rasping. Daenerys met Aegon's eyes. Brother, end this, or I will stand with them against you. Not for throne, Her voice cracked. But for hope, he searched her face. Whatever he saw broke final citadel of will. Fingers uncurled from sword. She slid Blackfire from his grip. Weight sagged his shoulders. "Hope," he whispered, tasting word foreign. Jon exhaled long. Around them combat slacked. Unsullied lowered shields, Dothraki milled uncertain. Northmen tossed down looted food sacks. Grey Worm barked again. This time order to fall back. Across riverbank Davos sheathed blade. Tyrion sank to knees, relief shuddering. Arya, bleeding shoulder, allowed Davos to tend. Above, Vagr spiraled to Red Keep's training yard, landing with thump. Rhaegal slogged toward shallows to submerge wounded wing in cooling water. Drogon curled protectively around Daenerys and Jon, smoke venting from nostrils in defensive puffs. Balerion remained upright but still, watching Conqueror with jeweled predator eyes. Silence deepened to texture of falling ash. From within Red Keep, a distant horn sounded, Cersei's final rally cry to pockets of Lannister resistance still scattered. But echo felt thin now, brittle. Tyrion rose, wiping soot. "We move to secure the queen named Cersei," he declared.
"No sack."
"No fire. Enough." Grey Worm glanced to Daenerys. She inclined head. He gestured. Unsullied detachments formed, shields locked not for assault but suppression, advancing in measured cadence. Jon offered forearm to Aegon. The older man hesitated, then accepted clasp. Together they stood, blood-soaked earth between them. Aegon met Jon's eyes, whispering, "In another turning, you knelt." "Perhaps," Jon answered, "but this turning we stand." Daenerys turned Blackfire over in palms, studying ripples of Valyrian steel catching flicker of dying fires. She looked up at the city. Spires cracked, bells fallen, smoke curling like ghosts over rooftops, and felt weight heavier than swords settle upon shoulders. Night crept though sun yet shone. Cinders drifted like black snow. Somewhere children sobbed. Somewhere gold cloaks surrendered at last. Somewhere Cersei plotted final treachery. Yet for the first time since dawn, flame no longer spread. Evening swathed King's Landing in bruised colors, purple shadows in alleys, ember glow on palace stones, molten veins where wildfire still seethed beneath rubble. In Great Hall of Red Keep, temporary triage became assembly. Broken benches served as stretchers, shattered marble tiles piled against walls as crude barricades. There, under fractured candelabra, the Conqueror bled onto linen while Maester Wolkan stitched thigh and bicep. Jon stood guard at his side, long claw restored to scabbard but hand never far. Daenerys paced before Iron Throne, its twisted swords gleaming dull amid smoke haze. She did not sit. Instead she watched Tyrion, Arya, Davos, Sansa, and Grey Worm debate dispositions with ragged voices. Bran had been wheeled in two, his distant gaze seeing what none else could, though he spoke not yet. Soldiers of all banners lined walls, uneasy allies. "Cersei flees to Maegor's tunnels," Arya said, pressing bandage to shoulder. "I can track." Sansa shook head. "Trap. She'll use wildfire caches. Better flush her out by sealing exits." Grey Worm proposed collapsing tunnel mouths with dragonfire. Davos countered risk of cataclysmic chain blasts under city. Tyrion suggested offering safe passage for civilians still inside Inner Ward, then cornering Cersei. None satisfied all. Throughout, Aegon remained silent as Maester's needle bit flesh. Only once, when Grey Worm mentioned dragons again, did he speak. "No more fire under city," he rasped, surprising counsel with concession. Outside, small folk braved smoke to drag buckets from city wells, dousing roof fires. Northmen and gold cloaks formed impromptu brigades. Dothraki guarded bread warehouses from looters, more from Daenerys's command than empathy. Unsullied established perimeter at Great September's ruin, posting archers to deter rioting. Night deepened. Torchlight flickered on soot grime across every face in council. Daenerys finally halted pacing. "I will go," she said, voice carved from resolve. "Cersei thinks only dragons speak for me. Let her hear me without flame." Tyrion blinked. You propose to parley? I propose to end this, Daenerys replied. Words, steel, or fire. Whichever she chooses. Jon stepped beside her. Not alone. Aegon attempted to rise. Wolkan pushed him back. You bleed yet, your grace. I ride, Aegon growled. Daenerys shook head. Rest. Your dragons will guard. She turned to Jon. 2 is enough. Grey Worm objected, but she silenced him with raised hand. She wants my head most. She'll listen to my voice only. Jon stands witness, nothing more. Sansa eyed her. If Cersei kills you, the realm shatters. Daenerys smiled. Bleak. If I burn the realm, it shatters anyway. She strode from hall. Jon followed. Moon climbed as they approached Red Keep's Dragon Pit entrance. Once collapsed by wild green flames unleashed in last war. Now rubble framed a jagged arch, flanked by flickering braziers that Grey Worm squads placed earlier. Gold cloaks loyal to Lannister barred path. But they lowered pikes when catapults of unsullied leveled crossbows, and when they saw who walked among them, Targaryen silver hair, stark cloak. They parted wordlessly. Within collapsed corridor, smoke licked ceiling beams, but heat subsided. Ash-coated floor like gray snowdrift. Jon and Daenerys advanced slowly, hands visible, swords sheathed. Behind, distant scuffle signaled unsullied, securing intersections. They reached chamber once storing alchemist's secrets. Mosaic of faith militant lay shattered on ground, shards crunching under boots. Here, torches revealed Cersei Lannister perched upon half-toppled column, hair singed, gown stained with ash and crimson. Qyburn hovered behind, gaunt as death. 20 Lannister guards ringed them, crossbows trained but trembling at sight of queen and bastard wolf. Cersei's smile curved, brittle. The Dragon Queen comes at last to bow? Daenerys drew herself tall. The war is over. Surrender the crown. The people need healing. The people need strength, Cersei hissed, eyes wild. Not broken tyrants masquerading as saviors. Jon stepped forward. Your banners fell.
Belsran.
You refused peace. She laughed, sharp like glass crack. Peace? I saw your peace. Fire raining from sky, streets awash in my children's blood. Her gaze flicked to Daenerys. You swore justice once, girl. Yet here stands justice. Lioness defiant while dragons devour BA. Bess. Daenerys's knuckles whitened at sides. I spared more than you ever did when wildfire consumed September, when crossbows killed fathers for debts owed. Cersei waved dismissively. Quaint ledger of grievances. History crowns victor, not gentle heart. Jon felt tension coil. He measured distance, guard placements. Cersei toyed with golden cup at her side. It glinted suspicious. Residue of green tears along rim. Wildfire vial? His gut clenched. Tyrion's plea echoed memory. Listen for bells. He steeled voice calm. Your grace, your child within. He noticed shape of womb under torn gown. You risk all. Yield, face trial. Spare the innocent. His own words burned. He once urged same to father's murderer. Cersei's eyes narrowed. Innocent? Does wolf speak innocence while northern brutes pillage my streets? Unsullied footfalls approach tunnel. Lannister guards tensed. Cersei's hand slid toward cup. Daenerys saw it. She lifted palm gently, voice soft. No more children burn. Cersei's lip quivered. You cannot protect them. No one protected mine. Silence heavy. Jon sensed thread snapping. He met Daenerys's eye, decision hung. She nodded slightly. He took step, unsheathing slowly, point angled to floor. Lannister guards drew tighter, crossbows centering. Cersei raised cup, shaking, green glint at lip. Come one step more and city posts taste dragonfire from beneath. She jerked head. Qyburn produced small torch brand. Jon halted. Daenerys whispered, Wildfire caches still line these tunnels. Her eyes flashed fear not for self but for thousands overhead. Cersei's voice cracked under weight of madness. I will birth this world anew with flame none control, not even dragons. Tears streaked soot on cheeks. My child will never live in world ruled by usurpers.
Quiburn lit torche, waxy pitch flarspetring.
Guards exchanged uneasy glances. Daenerys spread hands. We can help your child live. Rule in peace. Peace ends, Cersei spat. She looked to Jon. You of all should know monsters cannot father hope. Pain cut Jon though he held gaze steady. Let monsters die then, not children. For fragile instant, her eyes glassed with grief so raw even Qyburn flinched. She lowered cup slightly, but torch still raged. Outside, distant roar of dragons shook stones. Valyrian churned air. Merax's keen sorrowful note. Perhaps city's bones itself groaned under weight of destiny. Cersei set jaw. I choose my throne. She raised cup. In blur Arya Stark appeared from shadow behind Qyburn. She had tracked unseen, wound ignored. Dragonglass staff jabbed at torch, knocking it aside, green flames sputtering on stone harmless. Valyrian dagger flashed past Qyburn's throat. He fell gurgling. Cersei recoiled, guard bolts loosed. But Jon Dove, cloak spread, tackling Daenerys behind fallen altar fragments. Bolts peppered limestone. Arya lunged again, dagger aimed for Cersei's breast, but guard intercepted blade with bravery born of fear. Steel bit Arya's side. She twisted, slicing artery in guard's thigh. Both fell in tangle. Chaos erupted. Jon rose, parried thrusting spear, slashed hilt to jaw, dropping guard. Daenerys advanced, hand outstretched, voice ringing Valyrian phrase, signal to Drogon above. Stone ceiling vibrated. Rubble cascaded. Monstrous talon punched through, ripping hole. Drogon thrust head in, eyes blazing, teeth dripping molten saliva. Lannister guards fled or froze. Cersei stumbled backward, cup held high like talisman. Arya, bleeding, crawled toward. Daenerys spoke calm as still water. End this, Cersei, or Drogon ends you. Cup trembled. She stared into Dragon's furnace eyes, saw reflection of her own terror. Her defiance melted. Cup slipped from fingers, rolling, green liquid pooling harmless at feet. Jon exhaled. Guards dropped weapons. Drogon withdrew, rubble settling. Arya collapsed. Jon hurried to her side, pressing cloth. Cersei sank to knees among shards, laughter broken into sobs. She whispered, I wanted my child safe. Daenerys knelt opposite, expression gentled. Then surrender to justice. Let child be born free of our sins. Cersei nodded weakly. Guards bound her wrists with own belts. Qyburn lay dead. Wildfire splutter, extinguished. Dawn's first light washed over city ravaged yet standing. On Dragonstone's black sands months earlier, Daenerys dreamt of charred capital. This dawn rose on glimmer of possibility. Towers cracked but not toppled, banners cut yet not burnt beyond recognition. In Great Hall, throne loomed still, but around it formed semicircle of survivors. Sansa, Davos, Tyrion, Sam, Bran, Arya bandaged, Grey Worm stoic, Jon weary, Daenerys resolute, Aegon seated but alive. Before them knelt Cersei, wrists bound in cloth, belly quietly rounding. Outside, dragons perched, Balyrion's chest bandaged with tarp and chain, Regal's wings splinted, Vhagar resting, Merax's watchful. City rats scuttled among fallen swords. Ravens lined broken windowsills. Tyrion's voice carried, laced with exhaustion. Cersei of House Lannister, you are charged with treason, murder, wildfire terror, and violation of realm's peace. How plead? She raised chin, voice hoarse. Guilty. Murmur rippled. Aegon's eyes narrowed. Sentence be death. But Daenerys lifted hand. We are done with death. She met Conqueror's glare. She will be confined, child raised under watch. Justice tempered by mercy. Sansa frowned but said nothing. Jon nodded slightly. Bran spoke at last, words soft but weighty. Mercy is seed from which better world may grow. Aegon exhaled ragged, then dipped head once. As counsel wills. Silence settled. Fate of Westeros pivoted from swords to words. Tyrion scratched parchment. Charter for Interim Council, names penned. Daenerys Stormborn, Jon Snow, Sansa Stark, Tyrion Lannister, Davos Seaworth, Samwell Tarly, Grey Worm, and Aegon Targaryen as figurehead until Assembly of Lords could convene. Outside, carrion birds circled but no longer found fresh flames. Flea bottoms wells bubbled. Small folk carried buckets, dousing embers. The black water flowed green-tinged but unignited, bearing charred timbers out to sea. On ramparts where morning sun gilded cracked stone, Jon joined Daenerys. They watched workers unspool linen banners, white and crimson interwoven. The direwolf and dragon conjoined, new sigil of uncertain realm. "Will it hold?" she asked. He looked west where spires touched dawn. "If we guard it, together," she smiled, weary yet hopeful. Far behind them, Conqueror sat in shadow, bandaged leg propped, studying future he could no longer shape alone. He traced scar on hilt of Blackfire and wondered at path ahead. Bells lay silent in rubble, but another sound rose, hammer striking metal. New forges sparked in city squares, shaping nails and plowshares from broken scorpion arms. Children's laughter tentative pierced hush of reconstruction. Somewhere, a septon hummed hymn of renewal. Smoke thinned, sky brightened, dragons slept, wings folded, and in that unlikely calm, the realm's first breath of new era stirred motes of ash into freckles of light and blew them away on a wind unscented by fear. The hush that settled over King's Landing after the day of 3 dragons felt as fragile as spun glass. Sunlight seeped through a haze of soot and drifted ash, glimmering off broken tiles, and the jagged stumps of scorpion arms toppled from the ramparts. On the river, burnt hulks groaned against the quays, still smoldering inside their ribs. Salt air mingled with the muffling stink of charred tallow. Every street echoed, not with the bustle of a million souls, but with the low creak of handcarts bearing corpses toward makeshift pyres along the Rose Road. Small folk watched the carts pass with the awed dread usually reserved for visiting kings or plague wagons, and sometimes one voice rose in raw grief that pierced even the smoke-choked sky before guttering into silence again. 2 nights after the surrender, Jon Snow stood atop the shattered parapet above the King's Gate. Sunrise spread a diluted pink across the eastern horizon, weak as summer wine cut with rainwater. The morning breeze was cool, almost gentle, yet it smelled of old fires and the hint of rain still far out to sea. Below, the Blackwater eddied green around splinters of scorched masts and unmoored skiffs. Farther west, fleets bearing the Trout of Tully and the Golden Rose of Tyrell drifted at anchor, their captains awaiting a signal that might open or close the next chapter of history. Behind Jon, new timbers were being hoisted into place where the gate's portcullis had once hung. Northmen and Ironborn worked the capstans together, sweat beading on soot-smeared faces. Each heavy beam thunked against stone with the promise that the ruin could yet become a wall again, and each tug of the pulleys rasped with the question of who now owned the labor, whose laws would soon march beneath the archway these men were slowly resealing. The clatter of hooves approached. Jon turned as Arya drew her gray palfrey to a halt beside him. A linen bandage peeked through the seam of her doublet where Grey Worm's spear had scraped bone 2 days before. The wound had slowed neither her scouting nor her sharp tongue. She dismounted without ceremony, eyes scanning the horizon. "A dozen supply caravans through the Rose Road before dawn," she reported without preamble. Most turned back when they saw smoke. 2 pushed on. One's grain from Bitterbridge, the other wine and apples for some tavern on the Street of Flower. "We let them pass." Jon brushed ash from the parapet stone. "Good. Food will matter more than banners, soon enough." Arya grunted. "Banners still matter to lords." She leaned on the crenel, studying the city. "How many reckon with the notion of 2 dragons on the throne? They came because your letters said the long night was ended and the capital safe. They didn't sign up to watch Aegon squabble with Daenerys in council every dusk till midnight." Jon's mouth twitched. "They might get more of that than they hope. Gods help them." "Gods never did help a lord much," she said, half a smile ghosting across her lips. She nudged a loose stone with her boot and watched it tumble into the courtyard. "They need something solid to bow to, not a war that ended with nobody sure who actually won." She turned to him, eyes earnest. "We need you." He felt the familiar weight behind those 3 words, the expectation people draped around his shoulders wherever he went, even when he had no crown and less desire. "You have me," he said quietly, "but I can't be everything at once. Not king, counselor, healer, jailer." She touched the bandage at her shoulder, expression distant. "Be the piece that keeps the board from tipping. The rest of us can move around it." Then, in a softer voice, "Sansa can't hold the North and this city both. And Aegon is wounded and angry. Daenerys is grieving," Jon finished, too fast. A flush warmed his cheeks despite the cool air. "She's grieving for what she almost became again." Arya's gaze sharpened, but she said only, "Keep talking with her. We trust you." A horn sounded below, 2 short blasts from the Grand September's direction, the signal Tyrion had devised for council assembly that morning. Jon exhaled. Arya swung into her saddle, wheeled, and cantered back across the courtyard. She never asked whether he would attend, because she already knew he would. They met in the smaller solar behind Maegor's Holdfast, the chamber once used by Lord Commanders of the Kingsguard before the tower's top level had collapsed in the wildfire blasts. Dust motes swarmed the fractured sunbeams that slanted through a hole where roof slates were missing. A single long table had been dragged in, its center warped by heat. Someone, perhaps Sansa, had thrown a length of fresh linen over the scarred planks, tying the ends like a giant bandage. Sansa sat at the head, coiffed in northern braids still dusted with pale ash. To her right was Tyrion, quill already in hand. Aegon occupied the center on the other side, left leg stretched uncomfortably as Maester Wolken's stitches strained. Next to him, Daenerys stood rather than sit, her hands clasped behind her back like she feared what else they might do if left to twitch free. Grey Worm presented a silent flank behind her chair, spear but grounded. Davos leaned on the table near a plate of cold lamprey pie he would not touch. Samwell Tarly hovered by a stack of raven scrolls. Bran sat in his wheeled chair at the far end, ghostly calm, while Arya entered and took position behind him, leaning on the staff now shortened to cane length. When Jon stepped in, voices dampened. He found the lone vacant chair between Davos and Daenerys, every eye marking the space he filled as though it completed the shape of the meeting itself. Tyrion set down quill. "We have 2 matters that cannot wait," he began. "First, supply. Second, succession." A murmur rustled. Succession had become the ghost at every gathering. Rattling chains and corners, they all pretended not to hear. Davos cleared throat. "Grain stores in Flea Bottom are near empty. The Reach convoys are anxious. We can't feed loyal armies, let alone the city, on promises and broken cistern water." Sansa steepled fingers. "House Redwine's fleet arrived at Duskendale dawn past. They bring wheat from the arbor casks that once carried wine. They'll not sail into Blackwater without personal assurance they're safe from dragonfire." Daenerys lifted chin. "They have it. I gave word Balerion, Vhagar, and Meraxes will hunt only the sky beyond the city for 3 days. Drogon and Rhaegal remain tethered at the dragon pit. They can approach." Grey Worm's brows knit. He disliked the leash on dragons, yet he said nothing. Aegon's rumbling voice followed. "Send riders. The ships will unload at the river mouth. Unsullied escort grain through the mud gate. No banners, only white flags." Jon nodded. It was sound, but calm voices in a chamber could not yet smother the memory of screams outside its walls. "We should assign Northmen to walk with Unsullied," he said. "Let the people see 2 armies side by side as wardens, not conqueror and conquered." Sansa's eyes flickered gratitude. Aegon's remained unreadable, yet he dipped head a fraction, concession or calculation. Jon could not tell. Tyrion wetted lips. "Very well. Second matter." Quill tapped parchment. "We are ruling by committee. That cannot endure. A new sovereign, or sovereigns plural, must be named before the camps around King's Landing dissolve into little kingdoms again." Silence weighed. Daenerys spoke first. "The realm requires healing before coronation. Rebuild the markets, Reopen the guild halls. Bury the dead. Crowns can wait. Aegon's jaw tightened. Crown legitimizes authority to command that rebuilding, sister. Without it, every lord hedges bets. He gestured vaguely toward Sansa and Jon. We could hold a great council. Lords gather, vote their will. Tyrion grunted. A great council will take months to summon. Ravens across warring, ravaged lands. Lords too proud or too afraid to travel. Roads clogged with refugees. Jon's voice was low but clear. Then hold council here with those already present. The rest may send proxies. Whoever claims the throne must vow mercy and restraint. The city deserves that oath openly. Grey Worm exhaled through nose. The Unsullied will obey only Dragon Queen or Conqueror, not some lord's vote. Sansa stiffened. You'll have what you're given, soldier. In a blink, Unsullied spear tip scraped flagstones as it dipped half an inch. Jon's hand slid toward hilt. Arya's staff angled. Davos made a calming gesture. Daenerys touched Grey Worm's arm. The commander straightened, spear now still as stone. He speaks for his legion, she said. It is fair counsel. Tyrion resumed. We have, in this room, the bloodlines of two dynasties, Stark and Targaryen. We have the living embodiment of old prophecy, a man whose parentage unites them. We have a queen who has already been recognized by half the realm. And we have a conqueror returned by forces we scarcely grasp. Sansa carries the north. Aegon wields the loyalty of two elder dragons. Jon carries both the love of soldiers and the memory of the fight beyond the wall. He spread hands. How do we seat one without sundering the others? No response came. Only Bran's voice slid into stillness like a ripple on glass. Not one, he said. 3. Everyone turned. Bran's pale eyes glimmered in that half-light. Westeros is more than crown. The land is fractures. Ice and fire, past and future, death and life joined. 3 heads for 3 dragons. A wheel with 3 spokes rolls true over broken ground. Sansa frowned. You're proposing a tricoronate?
Sam cleared throat.
In ancient Old Town, the great houses once ruled by triarchy for a generation. 3 lords elected for peace after King Garth Greenhand's fall. It worked until greed split them. Tyrion's brows arched. And you suggest repeating history's most delicate experiment at the locus of endless war? Bran's calm did not waver. Change is always delicate, yet one crown cannot balance ice, fire, and shadow. Triarchy may. Aegon stared at Bran as though weighing the words with the scars on his soul. Daenerys shifted, glancing to Jon, then to Sansa. Jon cleared throat. Who would those 3 be? The blood of dragons, Bran answered, gaze drifting to Daenerys and then Aegon. The blood of the wolf who is also dragon, gaze upon Jon, and the voice of the realm's memory. His hand rested on his own armrest, but his meaning set the room rippling in uncertainty, whether he proposed himself or memory as counsel. Tyrion resumed scribbling furiously. Each holds equal veto, consensus rule, realms seldom stable under committees. Sansa stood. The North won its freedom by burning banners and burying kin. It will not seat beneath any council, triarchy or no, if our voice is diluted. She glanced at Jon, then Daenerys. Yet I see wisdom in Bran's words. 3 might hold each other's worst instincts in check. Aegon rasped. The sword of judgment cannot be shared. Kingdoms need decisive hand. Daenerys stepped closer to him, voice soft so only those nearest heard. You believed that 2 days ago, yet here we stand breathing because mercy tempered judgment. She offered Blackfire, still wrapped in linen from Wolkin's infirmary. Take it back if you must, but wield it beside and not above us. He studied the blade, the linen stained with his own blood. Slowly he wrapped fingers around the hilt. The room tensed, yet he did not stand. Instead he laid the sword across his knees. 3 then, he exhaled. But understand dragons answer to strongest bond. If the triarchy fractures, the beasts will follow hearts, not parchment. Tyrion looked between faces. A document can be drafted, Powers enumerated. Veto, regency, lines of succession if one of you falls. He paused, quill trembling. You intend children? The bluntness startled Jon as much as Daenerys, whose cheeks flushed faintly. Aegon gave bitter chuckle. If there is realm left for them to inherit. Sam interjected gently, healing first, ruling later. Perhaps the triarchy dissolves itself after 5 years, balanced reconstruction. Then a new great council elects sole monarch from among your lines. Davos snorted but nodded. Build trust in time. Let folks see you mending walls, not seizing crowns. Arya tapped Cain. And Cersei, Tyrion answered, voice flat. Trial once maesters confirm her child's health. Exile to Old Town Citadel until birth. After we decide. Grey Worm tossed. Spear haft from hand to hand. Uneasy. Yet he said nothing. That dusk, Jon walked the ruins of the Street of Sisters. Smoke still curled up from cellar vents where clots of rage smoldered. He helped lift a charred beam from atop a crushed water barrel, and a child of perhaps 8 crawled free, eyes wide with fear until she saw the direwolf embroidered on his cloak. She did not speak. He found a dry blanket in a half-burned inn and draped it round her shoulders before sending her toward a line of septas distributing bowls of thin porridge. As the sun bled gold into the horizon, Davos joined him near the dragon pit's cracked outer wall. The Onion Knight wiped grit from his brow. You think this tri-rule of Brands holds water? Jon watched Regal settle onto the wide plinth that once supported the Colossus of Balerion. His splinted wing bathed in gold. Water or wine, we'll drink it. Nothing else left in the cup. Davos chuckled without mirth. Aye. But cups with 3 handles are devilish to lift. Jon's shoulders sagged. You doubt Daenerys, I know. It's not that, lad. Aegon's the one wounds me. I see in him what Stannis became near the end. So wrapped in destiny that he lost sight of hearts beating beneath that cause. Jon looked at Davos, eyes shadowed. He yielded when it counted. For now, Davos agreed. Yet we'd be fools not to keep flint and steel ready for sparks. They heard wings overhead. Drogon glided low, black hide luminous in dusk, casting long shadow. The noise drew small folk to stare, their faces lined with equal parts awe and terror. Jon watched Daenerys upon the saddle, silver braids whipping behind. The dragon swooped over great September ruins and vanished beyond the hill of Rhaenys toward the river where pyres still burned. He flies patrol nightly, Davos observed. Each pass shortens the distance between dread and hope for these folk. They'll learn, Jon murmured. It just takes time. Davos considered. Time or a stable throne? Jon sighed. All stable thrones start shaky. 3 days later, the red wine grain convoy moored at the river mouth and unloaded under the supervised gaze of Regal circling overhead. Unsullied and Northmen marched the sacks through the mud gate into storehouses Tyrion had commandeered from defunct merchant guilds. Word spread fast that bread would be handed free at dawn markets. People lined streets through the night, clutching cracked bowls, unwilling to trust but unable to hope anywhere else. No rioting came. The Triarchy's first decree had commanded triple patrols. Unsullied by day, gold cloaks by dusk, Northmen in deep night, each under local septon oversight. Stranger arrangements had ruled in the long history of Old Town. None had kept peace so swiftly in King's Landing, if only because all citizens feared the dragons would correct what soldiers missed. Inside the Red Keep's high library, Sam and Bran unrolled brittle scrolls charting dragon ancestry, while Gendry, now Lord Baratheon by Sansa's letter, hammered new rivets for scorpion-broken balustrades. Grey Worm oversaw morgue trenches dug outside city walls. Each row of bodies wrapped in plain linen tagged with names were known, houses were guessed, blank were lost. Maester Wolkan produced records daily for families who came seeking. Daenerys spent her hours in the dragon pit yard, instructing surviving handlers to splice torn harness straps for Vagor and mare axes. Her quiet orders carried across the grit. No dragon to leave city skies without 2 riders, one for command, one for witness. She chose Missandei to serve as Drogon's companion-seated calm, and Regal accepted Podrick Payne, to Tyrion's perpetual wonder. Dragons, it seemed, could smell honesty the way hounds scented fear. For Aegon, healer's knots could not patch his mind as quickly as flesh. He limped through chambers at dawn, touching stone, murmuring memories of first conquest. Often he paused before murals of the Seven, tracing cracked paint. Tyrion once found him staring at a centuries-old tapestry of old Valyria hanging askew in the small hall. "We tried to outrun doom," Aegon said, voice remote. Fire followed. In those words, Tyrion heard the weight of a man unmoored in time. Sansa convened guild masters in the Tower of the Hand each afternoon, hearing petitions about lost shops, collapsed bridges, missing apprentices. She assigned Arya, whose wound knit slow but sure, to escort grain shipments into the poorest districts. Thieves learned fast that a Stark girl under the wolf banner moved like nightfall and punished like dawn. As the first week waned, Council hammered articles of triumvirate charter. Equal veto, unanimous assent for declarations of war, rotation of chair every fortnight, Bran's official role designated as Keeper of Memory and Warden of Mysteries. Tyrion insisted upon a scribal corps to publish decrees to every region. Davos argued for token reduction of taxes in crownlands to ensure goodwill. Sam wrote treatises on equitable grain distribution and new orphanages for children left parentless by the war. Jon visited the makeshift infirmaries nightly, sometimes bringing Regal's warmth to heat kettles of broth when chimneys lay shattered. And always, at dusk, Daenerys flew Drogon to the wide expanse of ruin where the September of Baelor had stood. She circled thrice, then landed among grass sprouts bursting through cracked marble. There she knelt among dust and bone, whispering prayers to gods she'd never known, until the bells she once feared to hear again felt like echoes of a distant life. On the 9th day, snow fell, first timid flakes drifting from a sky no longer choked with smoke. It coated fire-scorched timbers like forgiveness granted grain by grain. Children fled their tents to catch snow on tongues, giggling. Jon watched from atop Aegon's high hill, heart tight. The snow tasted of home. Beside him, Daenerys extended palm. The flakes melted instantly on her warm skin, but her smile lit the gloom. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The North's endless white?" "I miss its silence," Jon said. "But maybe silence can grow here too, under new snow." She studied him. "Will they ever forgive us?" He shrugged. "Forgiveness isn't given. It's built." She nodded, gaze drifting over city. "Then let's build." Winter's breath lingered only an hour that day. Yet each dawn after, more snow visited, dusting broken pillars, dulling edges of ruined iron spikes. The city began to look less like a burnt offering and more like a garden in winter, awaiting seeds. And seeds arrived. Tyrell gardeners from Highgarden, sworn to replant royal orchards. Dorne stonemasons offered sandstone to rebuild gates facing the sunrise. Even Braavosi bankers arrived, hawk-eyed, eager to renegotiate crown debts if Triarchy stood firm. Inside the throne room, workers erected scaffolds to shore cracked pillars. The Iron Throne remained untouched. Triarchy decreed no one sit until reconstruction finished, lest bent blades break under hidden weakness. It became a symbol of restraint, power waiting on healing. On the 20th day, lords of Riverlands, Vale, and Stormlands convened in the Dragon Pit, which had been swept and patched. They listened as Aegon, Daenerys, and Jon together pledged the sixfold oaths: to wield dragons only for defense, to levy armies only by consent of Great Council, to feed city before war chest, to tax no widow's bread. The lords, wary yet hopeful, swore provisional fealty until spring muster. In smaller chamber later, Tyrion confided to Sansa, "We've bought 6 months, a lifetime in politics." She smiled thinly. "A lifetime can birth another war." He raised goblet. "Then let us fill it with grain, not graves." Night deepened. Torches along city walls burned steady, not frantic. Unsullied patrolled in pairs with gold cloaks. Northmen sang low songs of winter hearths as they unloaded barrels of cod from White Harbor catches. Somewhere in Flea Bottom, a piper tried a jaunty tune. The melody cracked, then rose again, stubborn as weed through stone. In the royal gardens, what was left of them, Jon walked with Bran's chair rolling beside. Moonlight silvered shattered statues. Bran's voice wafted like falling snow. "Spring will come," he said. "You doubt, but the roots remember." Jon touched a blackened olive branch. "Roots can't heal ashes. Charcoal feeds soil," Bran murmured. "Ask the tree." He turned his eyes, pupils huge and dark, into moonlit sky. "I see green shoots in cracks of burned walls. Children running where corpses lay." His voice thinned. "I do not see who sits the throne in 10 years. That path is mist. But I see dragons soaring, wings mended, over fields of gold wheat." Jon drew breath. "Is that meant to comfort me?" Bran blinked once. "Yes." They continued in silence until Jon stopped at courtyard where Aegon, supported by crutches, practiced footwork with Grey Worm, gentle tilts of blade mirroring forms of old Valyrian dueling. Daenerys watched, arms folded, correcting posture with soft words. Sparks flew from clashing steel, but they were sparks of training, not war. Jon felt a knot ease inside. He whispered to Bran, "Perhaps Triarchy holds." Bran's chair creaked as he turned to leave. "Perhaps, but hold it fast, brother. Hold it with mercy." Jon looked skyward. Rhaegal and Drogon circled together under the moon, silhouettes crossing like quills writing on parchment of night. He thought of bells that had fallen silent, of wolves and dragons learning to share sky. He thought of snow that would melt, of seeds waiting under sooty soil, of children laughing amid ruins. He thought, for the first time in many moons, that the song might become softer. He stepped forward, and behind him Bran's voice drifted, soft as prayer. Winter ended. Let summer be long. And in the hush, Jon Snow believed it might. The midsummer moon hung plump and bruised above the red keep, its swollen halo diffusing through wisps of smoke that still wandered the sky like lost spirits in search of hearth fires. Below, the city's veins, those crooked, nameless lanes that stitched the hill of Rhaenys to the gutters of Flea Bottom, throbbed with new sounds. Hammers striking unbent nails, coopers rasping hoops to mend split barrels, children laughing at the novelty of warm bread that carried no tang of ashes. For the first time in memory, dawn promised not dread but simple labor. And promise, like a root thrust through stone, was everywhere. Jon Snow strode along the outer bailey, cloak snapping in a breeze that had traded its reek of cinders for the briny freshness of ships unloading in the Blackwater. At his flank walked Grey Worm, spear reversed in a show of peace. On his other side, Ser Davos Seaworth, sleeves rolled to the elbow, sun-cracked face thoughtful as a man counting tides. The unlikely trio paused at the mouth of a half-collapsed barracks where carpenters chipped away charred beams to salvage unburned timber. A broad-backed Northman with a russet beard saluted Jon with his adze. "Lord, sorry, your grace. Iron nails are shy this side o' the river. Without these supports'll snap come autumn rains." Davos knelt to pick a fistful of warped nails from a bucket. "Damps made brittle," he muttered. He stood, wiping grit on breeches, and turned to Grey Worm. "What say the quartermasters?" Grey Worm's dark eyes flicked to Jon for permission, then back to Davos. "Ironworks in Spicetown and Duskendale send 2 wagons tomorrow. Enough nails for 3 barracks. Maester Wolkin says storm clouds 7 days away." His voice remained flat, but Jon had learned to hear the quiet pride that lived beneath it. Each fact delivered was a wall reinforced against chaos. Jon clapped the unsullied commander's shoulder. "You've done well. Tell the men here to brace with rope lashings till the supply comes." Grey Worm nodded once, then strode off, barking the order in clipped Giskery. Jon watched the Northman grin in relief and returned to work before turning to Davos. How long before all the armies quartered under whole roofs? Davos squinted at rooftops where sunlight glinted on half-laid slates. 2 moons. If the timber keeps flowing and nobody picks another fight. Jon offered half a smile. "Then let's keep peace at least that long." They set off again toward the Gate of the Gods, newly bandaged in fresh-cut oak that gleamed pale against centuries' dark masonry. Above the arch, the direwolf and dragon banner fluttered, stitches still visible where the seamstress had spliced the sigils into one cloth. Small folk passing beneath looked up more often than not. Some with narrowed eyes, some with hesitant awe, most simply curious how long that cloth would stay aloft before a new wind of ambition ripped it down. As they crossed the cobbles, Jon heard quick hoofbeats. Ser Brienne rode up, dust rising around her destrier's fetlocks. She swung down in a swirl of wolf and lion surcoat, Sansa's gift to the new captain of the Queen's Guard, and dipped her head. "Lord," she caught herself. "Your Grace, Lord Davos. The Triarchy convenes within the hour. Lady Sansa asked me to escort you." Jon blinked. "An hour early?" Brienne's mouth tightened. A raven arrived from Old Town, Archmaester Ibro's seal. Davos puffed cheeks. "Better hurry, then." The solar behind Maegor's holdfast, hastily restored and half-lit by mirrored lamps, held the hush of a winter library when they entered. Sansa presided from the head of the table, fingers curling around the wax-sealed scroll. Across from her sat Tyrion, cool poised yet unmoving, his expression caught between anticipation and foreboding. Daenerys leaned against a window brace, the dawn halo making an argent nimbus of her hair. Aegon occupied a sturdy wooden chair built high enough to rest his mending leg, Blackfire sheathed across his lap like a sleeping hound. Bran's wheeled seat faced the table's long side, Arya perched behind him, spry as a lynx despite the fresh scar puckering her left flank. When Jon took his place, Sansa broke the seal. "Archmaester Ibro's rights," she began, voice clear. "That Cersei Lannister was delivered to the Citadel at sunset 4 days past. She is in good health, as is her unborn child. The Archmaesters confirm a due term of 5 moons. Sansa's eyes flicked to Tyrion, perhaps measuring his flinch. "They request guidance on conditions of confinement, custody of the babe after birth, and the length of her exile." Tyrion exhaled through his nose. "The babe will become a pawn before first breath if we are not careful." Daenerys straightened. "The child is innocent. We dare not visit the mother's sins upon it." Aegon's jaw flexed. "Yet the child may grow to rally lion loyalists. One cub, many claws." Arya drummed fingertips on Bran's chair. "Then raise it here, away from lion dens." Sansa's brows rose. "In King's Landing? Surrounded by those who loathe its blood." Arya shrugged. "Better under watchful eyes than in Old Town's maze of whispers." Bran spoke, voice soft as snowfall. "Whatever chamber holds that child will shape stories told about us all." Jon folded arms. "We send Cersei to the eastern free cities once the child is weaned. She lives under house arrest with septas and a maester. Her child fostered at Storm's End. Gendry is sworn to us. The Baratheon seat bears no love of lions, nor of dragons strong enough to tempt rebellion." Tyrion's eyes flicked up, calculating. "The Crownlands will raise brows at Dothraki on the Stormlands shores." Gendry's deep baritone rumbled from doorway. He had followed Brienne unseen. "My folk fear storms worse than horses. I'll take the babe. Storm's End stone is thick. Thicker still, our oaths." A murmur. Daenerys nodded, approval brightening violet eyes. Aegon tapped Blackfire, glancing to Jon. After a beat, he dipped head. "Storm's End, then." Sansa stroked the scroll, as though smoothing the weight of decision into parchment. "I will draft response to the Citadel." Jon looked to Bran, who stared at a dust mote swirling in amber beam. "Is it wise?" Bran's lips twitched. "Paths branch. This one harms least." Tyrion inked quill. "Next order coin." "The Iron Bank delegation awaits answer." "Will the Triarchy honor Cersei's remaining debt?" Daenerys's gaze chilled. "We will not pay for a war she waged." Aegon's fingers drummed sword hilt. "Yet refusing the Iron Bank invites higher interest next time." Davos leaned forward. "Offer partial repayment, 1/4. Rest forgiven upon completion of harbor reconstruction. Show good faith and prudent caution." Tyrion scribbled. "I'll compose the terms. They'll bellyache, then agree." Sansa turned pages in her ledger. "The North sends 30 carts of oats within a fortnight. We can spare that. House Mormont pledges timber." She shot Arya a sideways smirk. Bearwood outlasts most storms. Arya snorted. Jon felt tension ease as talk shifted to sewer repairs, to new wells, to the training of City Watch under Grey Worm's chosen captains. The Triarchy, one meeting at a time, was holding. Outside, Regal beat sky in slow, meditative arcs while masons atop the Tower of the Hand set new flagstones between charred merlins. From that height, the city no longer resembled a carcass so much as a patient at rest, bandaged and breathing steadily. Plumes of cook smoke rose from the street of flour, thicker than they'd been in years, telling of ovens coaxed back to life. Bells had not been rehung, but the absence felt less like dread now and more like silence before a song. In the Dragon Pit yard, Daenerys knelt beside Drogon's foreclaw, pressing fingertips to a chip in the obsidian-like talon. She murmured old Valyrian lullabies while handlers dabbed salve on the scale cracks along his flank. Aegon approached, cane tapping dust. He paused, watching her speak to the beast as though to a wounded child. After a moment he said, "His fire grows tempered, so must ours." She rose, turning. "You feared I would light the city again." His shoulders lifted in half-shrug. "Fear is candlelight, reveals cracks. Mine were legion." He stared upward where Balerian's silhouette darkened midday blue, wing beats heavy. "I crossed time's fissure to prevent winter. Found myself forging another." Daenerys touched his elbow. "Together we quenched it before embers spread. Let that be our chronicle." He studied her hand. "Chronicles are penned by victors." "We are not victors," she said. "We are gardeners now. Come." Jon waits with the septon to bless the first rebuilt orphanage. She smiled faintly. "You may wield Blackfire as ribbon-cutting sword if you like." He barked a laugh, short and honest, perhaps first since his return. They turned toward the city, dragons overhead trailing after like myths humbled by their own survival. That night, somewhere beyond the sprawl of hovels near the King's Gate, a dozen lanterns looped on strings above a makeshift square where singers gathered with bone flutes and a cracked lute. Children stamped ash into dust and whirled hand in hand round a chalk-lined circle. Jon came upon them by chance, wandering the streets in plain cloak. A girl pulled him into the dance before she realized who he was. Her gasp of recognition turned quickly to shy grin when he did not recoil. Soon he was spinning in slow ring, lanternlight painting warm strokes across faces that only days ago had flattened themselves against cellar floors. As the music waned, Jon caught sight of Daenerys leaning in alley mouth, Missandei beside her. She observed the dancing with wistful half-smile. Their eyes met over bobbing lanterns. Something unspoken passed. A pledge, or perhaps just a breath of gratitude. She ebbed back into darkness, leaving him to the dance. Weeks melted into the slow churn of a new season. Snow fell once more and stayed, layering the city in quiet white. Houses festooned their cracked lintels with evergreen boughs salvaged from royal hunting preserves. Tyrion convinced the Iron Bank envoys to underwrite a City Watch stipend on condition of shared oversight, a stroke that sparked jokes of gold counting copper. Gendry's carpenters fitted the first new gate on Dragon Road, emblazoning its keystone with a hammer struck through a crown. In quiet sanctuary within the Blackwater Rushes, a band of faith militant laid down arms and took shovel and trowel, guided by Davos to build hospice for the maimed. The Hound arrived unheralded, eyeing the refuge with scowl, and took up a spade, saying only, "Ground still hard as rock. Hammer." When a monk offered prayer, Clegane spat and kept digging, yet returned daily. Sansa dispatched ravens proclaiming a winter harvest festival. Bread sent south in exchange for Dornish figs and Tyrell wines, to be shared in palace courtyard beneath fresh-hung ivy. Lord Royce arrived from the Vale with wagons of stone-milled flour and a promise that his knights would patrol trade roads free of toll till spring thaw. He bowed to Jon, Daenerys, and Aegon in turn, grumbling about overcrowded thrones but honoring each oath. Bran's visions turned outward, widening from crows over the city to eagles across the neck, to whale songs in the sunset sea. He spoke of long winters past, of wildflowers poised to bloom on dragon-scorched slopes. Sometimes he whispered warnings of sickness in swamps or tongues of flame rising in stepstones. Each time watchers were sent, each time threat averted. Thus the realm's new warden of mysteries nudged disaster aside like a gardener plucking weeds unseen. One sunrise near the turn of moon, Daenerys met Jon atop the highest remnant of the ruined September snow dusted their cloaks. Below, work gangs chiseled melted bells into slabs to pave a plaza of reconciliation. She offered him a parchment, lines of ink in her firm hand. "It is an oath," she said, "that no dragon shall meet punishment without consent of the three." Jon unfolded it. "You needn't bind yourself," she cut in soft. "I bind us all. The realm gave fear. We return trust." He smiled and signed beneath her name. Later that day Aegon added his flourish with shaking hand. Yet he did, and Bran's stylus scrawled a mysterious mark below, ink shimmering odd green for an instant before drying black. On the eve of first full thaw, the Triarchy stood together on the repaired ramparts and watched barges glide upriver bearing saplings for a park to replace the scorched gardens outside the dragon pit. 3 dragons soared overhead, Regal fully healed, Vagor slower but strong, Balyrion's massive shadow trailing like a storm cloud that never broke. Children chased that shadow along the wharf, laughing in no fear. Jon turned to Daenerys and Aegon. "Not long ago, this city trembled at dragon wings." Aegon's scarred mouth tilted. "It still trembles, but tremble can be awe, not terror." Daenerys lifted gaze to the horizon where distant banners, Crane of House Crane, Crab of Celtigar, marched to aid in harbor works. "Awe built on kindness. That must be our legacy." Snowflakes kissed her lashes then. The season's last flurry, perhaps. She breathed it in. Jon laid hand on rampart stone, warmth from sun thawing frost. "Summer will be long," he said, echoing Bran. And there, high above a city stitched anew from ash and mercy, 3 conquerors of ice and fire watched the snowflakes melt before touching ground. Bell towers lay silent still. No rush to hang iron tongues, but far below, a mason hammer tapped rhythm onto stones, resonant as the heartbeat of a world beginning again. Dawn broke like spilled milk across the ridges of the Blackwater Valley, thin and streaked with lavender. The river below whispered over its shoals, tugging the wreckage of a burnt galley free from mud that had held it all winter. Every drift of cold wind carried the sweet rot of thawing reeds and the faint metallic tang of old blood, reminders that even rivers never forget. On the upper terrace of the Red Keep, Jon Snow woke with a start at the caw of a raven perched upon the empty stone pedestal that once held a bronze sundial. He blinked against the gray chill, flexing fingers numbed by sleep and the ambient bite of early spring. The raven hopped once, dropped a half-eaten beetle beside his boot, and flapped off toward the rookeries. Jon gathered his cloak close around his shoulders, unsure whether the shiver in his chest belonged to the cool air or the dream that had driven him from bed. In it, he'd seen the wall again, towering, pristine, unbreached by the Night King's fires. But when he reached out to touch the ice, it melted under his hand, and a million tiny reflections of himself slid away into dark water. Such dreams came rarely now, yet when they did, they lingered like thin smoke winding through his waking thoughts. Across the courtyard, the smithy chimneys exhaled their first black sighs. Sparks from coal forges popped at the edges of Jon's vision as he descended the stair. He found Regal resting in the shadow of a buttress, dew purling on green gold scales. The dragon nickered low in the throat, hungry but patient. Jon scratched the soft seam behind the creature's jaw ridge, feeling the subcutaneous heat of dragon flame stirring beneath hide. He breathed deep. "Breakfast soon, my friend." He chuckled and felt foolish for speaking aloud to a beast that answered mostly with instinct and scent. But Regal's eyes slitted in contentment, and sometimes that was comfort enough. Booted footsteps echoed down the corridor archway. Sam Tarly shuffled into view, parchment tucked beneath one elbow, cheeks radiant with the flush of brisk walking or nerves. He straightened upon seeing Jon. "There you are. I've just come from Bran. He asked for you." Sam's expression shifted between wonder and worry. His ravens bring ill tidings from the trident. Jon's stomach tightened. What has happened now? Fevers? Bandit raids? Sam hesitated, holding out the parchment. A contingent of Sellswords abandoned the Stoneway encampments during the night, about 800, mostly second sons. They were bound by Triarchy charter to help clear the Blackwater snags and rebuild ferry docks. The letter claims they were bribed by a Volantene envoy. Half a dozen small folk saw their banners riding south. Report says they seized a grain convoy and 2 hostages, a Bravosi envoy and a Riverlander girl. He bit his lip. Lord Davos is livid. Jon took the parchment, scanning the hasty script. The only power with coin enough to lure second sons from charter is the 9 free cities, or Iron Bank. He rubbed his thumb against ink that smudged slightly. But the bank just renegotiated our debts. They won't prolong instability. Sam pursed his lips, then forged ahead. Bran believes Volantis seeks leverage. There have been rumors of a new claimant to the Triarchy forming in the disputed lands. Refugees talk of a red-handed priest promising Empire reborn. Jon exhaled slowly. He looked past Sam into the wavering heat above the forge chimneys. Gather the Triarchy at first bell. We'll hear Bran's ravens. Where is Daenerys?
Dragoenpit, Samensard.
Inspecting Drogon's harness. Jon nodded, then caught the glimmer in Sam's eye. Speak.
Sam flushed.
That Riverlander girl hostage. They think she may be one of Gendry's new ward charges. Lady Lavaena Page's niece. If we lose her, the Lord's declarant of Derry may turn against us. Then we shan't lose her, Jon said. He folded the parchment and slipped it into his belt. Are any ships ready? 1, Sam said. The Wyvern's Grace. Sturdy cog. Good for the Trident's shallow banks. Tell Davos to prepare her. We sail by dusk if the council agrees. Jon patted Riegel's flank, then followed Sam toward the council chamber. They gathered at a round table in the old small council tower, the walls still blackened from wildfire burns, though the cracks had been repointed and new shutters hung on scorched hinges. The table was a recent addition. Thick oaken rings carved from the heart of the great Kingswood ash felled during the siege. Tyrion commissioned the top and had 3 dragon heads chased in silver, 1 facing north, 1 east, 1 south, none west, a silent reminder that their realm's back was turned to the past. Aegon arrived first, a slight limp still evident but not slowing the measured thud of his blackthorn cane. He carried Blackfire sheathed, though the scabbard gleamed from fresh oil and polishing. He acknowledged Jon with a curt nod, then eased into his seat, an unadorned chair no taller than the others by his request. Daenerys entered moments later, radiating afternoon glare despite the torches. Her hair hung loose, silver waves falling to mid-back, a tiny braid at her left temple the only concession to Targaryen custom. She kissed Sam's cheek in greeting. He still blushed like a boy, then lowered herself opposite Aegon, rolling her shoulders. Missandei arrived behind, parchment satchel slung across shoulder. Sansa and Tyrion slipped in together, quills tucked into her belt, ink on his sleeve. Arya perched in a stretch of windowsill, silent as dawn, eyes flicking from face to face. Grey Worm took his place against the wall behind Daenerys. Bran was last, wheeled in by a mute stable lad. His gray gaze was unreadable as he settled into the stillness at the table's north point. Tyrion tapped goblet for hush, though the room was already silent. "We've word of desertion on the Stoneway," he began, voice clipped. "A Sellsword company's gone rogue with hostages. We must decide response." Daenerys's expression hardened. "How many?"
Samensard.
800 mounted. Grey Worm's brows knit. "Unsullied can ride by dawn. Take them by night." Aegon rapped knuckles on table. "A hammer where a scalpel serves better. If Volantis buys Sellswords, it's not 800 we fight. It's 9,000 next moon." He turned to Jon. "You suggest speed, not force." Jon nodded. "Wyvern's Grace departs tonight. We sail at twilight. Regal and I shadow overhead. A small strike, rescue hostages, sink their supply barges. Deny victory, break their contract. Daenerys met Jon's eyes. One dragon is enough? Rhaegal still owes them from the Blackwater. Jon answered with a hint of humor. Sansa spoke next. Who will govern the city while you're gone? Gendry returned to Storm's End. Davos at sea. We risk perception of weakness if both dragon riders are away. She eyed Daenerys and Aegon. Daenerys lifted 2 fingers. I remain. Drogon heals slower from last sweep. She glanced at Aegon. He will keep order. Aegon inclined head. So be it. Tyrion scribbled. Motion carried. Now diplomacy. Sam produced another parchment. Word from Tarth. Lord Selwyn sails to deliver limestone and cod, but he requests reassurance about the Golden Company remnants still scattered in the Stormlands. He fears they may raid villages on Cape Wrath. Arya snorted. They're rats without a piper. A dozen half-starved bands. No gold, no elephants. That dozen can still burn fields, Sansa warned. Aegon drew breath. Send a royal proclamation. Amnesty and coin for any Sellsword who pledges to rebuild roads and plow fields. If they refuse, they are outlaw, no trial offered. Tyrion's brow rose. Clever. A carrot with a carrot-shaped sword. Jon approved. And bind them by contract to Storm's End. Gendry will keep them honest. Daenerys' gaze softened at Jon's quick support. Draft the proclamation, Tyrion. He bowed slightly. With pleasure. Arya slipped from windowsill to Bran's side, whispering. Bran widened eyes a fraction, then spoke. Hold a feast in the dragon pit when the proclamation is read. Invite the city. Free bread, barrels of Reach Red, songs from Dorne. Show Sellswords the people they might defend rather than pillage. Daenerys' lips parted, surprised by the suggestion. She smiled. I approve. Tyrion's quill scratched. How many casks of wine remain unloaded? Sansa smirked. Enough to drown even you, imp. He sniffed. We'll ration. Quill scratched again. The meeting rolled on. Matters of arch repairs, plague ward in Flea Bottom, a Dornish envoy offering orange blossoms and 20 bowyers. Yet Jon's mind remained on the rescued hostages and the Sellsword betrayal. As the council adjourned, Daenerys lingered near him. You'll be careful? He nodded, sliding parchment and dagger into belt. Rhaegal's teeth remained sharp. She traced the sleeve of his cloak, as though shaping words she'd chosen carefully. Power shifts. Rumors swirl. They'll test us, test you. Make them remember mercy is strength, not weakness. He clasped her hand, pressing calloused palm to his. I'll bring the girl back, and the envoy alive. He may speak truths we need. She squeezed once, released. Then go. Wyvern's Grace set sail at moonrise, its patched canvas lantern lit by swaying decks. A dozen Northmen rowers bent oars while Davos stood at the helm, breath clouding. Jon stood near prow. Rhaegal stirred above in midnight gloom, circling to shield from coastal watchers. They cleared the Blackwater mouth by second hour, prow cutting mirrored moonlight. The river narrowed, reeds whispering against hull. Davos guided through shallows with deft curses. On deck, Jon tightened sword belt, scanning banks where torchlight might betray an ambush. Near dawn they spied a campfire on South Bank. Green banners with red kraken intertwined, a Volantine coat of arms revisited. Jon signaled. Rhaegal descended from cloud, wings stirring river mist into scalding eddies. Sellsword sentries shouted, crossbows loosed, bolts ricocheted harmless off scale. Rhaegal roared, campfires snuffed as men scattered. Wyvern's Grace grounded at a sandbar. Jon leapt ashore with 10 Northmen and 4 unsullied volunteers. Blades met only ragtag guards, barely a score. They surrendered when Rhaegal's shadow fell across tents. Hostages found near a cookfire. The Braavosi envoy, bruised but proud, and a girl of 12 in travel rags. Jon cut her bonds. She stared at him, lips trembling. You're the Wolf King, she whispered. He coughed. Not a king. He lifted her onto his hip. Just a man with a dragon friend. She glanced at Rhaegal and giggled, awed. The Braavosi envoy bowed low. "We owe our freedom to you, Lord Snow. Braavos remembers its debts." Jon nodded, already scanning trees for further threats. The Sellsword captain, captured alive, knelt bound at his feet, trembling. Jon hauled him up. "Who paid you?" The man swallowed. "A red priest, R'hlloress acolyte, rode with a Volantine banker. Said gold awaited south at stepstones once we'd sown fear." Jon's pulse quickened. Melisandre's brethren? Another flame-scarred zealot? He ordered the man bound aboard. Dawn blushed across sky as Wyvern's grace cast off, regal soaring overhead like a jubilant hawk. Davos steered homeward, sails filling with favorable breeze. The rescued girl clutched Jon's cloak, marveling at Dragon's reflection rippling across the river. The city greeted their return with a clang of smith hammers and the startled laughter of beggars seeing a dragon stoop low above the piers. Davos guided the cog to moor while Regal perched upon the dragon pit dome, giving a triumphant screech. Tyrion met them on quay, flanked by Sansa and Lord Royce. "Swift justice indeed," Tyrion said, eyes merry. "And timely, our feast begins at sundown. The city shall have two causes to cheer." Jon handed off the captive captain to Grey Worm's waiting soldiers, then escorted the envoy and girl toward the palace. Sansa bent to the child. "Welcome home, Lavenna." The girl breathed her thanks. Feast preparations filled the dragon pit. Banners hung from stone ribs of dome. Long tables arrayed in rings around the sand circle where once dragons were imprisoned. Now musicians tuned lutes upon hastily built dais. Bakers carried trays of honey cakes shaped like dragon wings. Crate horn lanterns dangled overhead, glowing amber. At dusk, sun's last rays painted spire fragments gold. The Triarchy entered to a roar from thousands of small folk, guild masters, and soldier companies pressed shoulder to shoulder. Jon guided Lavenna to a vantage seat near the braziers, where she clapped hands at the scent of cinnamon. Daenerys lifted goblet to crowd. "This bread, this song yours. Today we prove not by sword but by heart that Westeros stands unbroken." Cheer rolled like thunder. Musicians struck chords. Aegon remained at her side, posture rigid. But when children rushed forward to tug his cloak, eyes wide at the scarred hero, he bent, offering them shards of polished dragon talon as tokens. Their squeals of excitement softened his stern brow. Jon watched from dais edge, his own flute of watered wine in hand. Tyrion sidled up, balancing on a barrel. A fortnight ago they scurried from burning streets. Now they fight for second slices of lemon cake. Jon sipped. "Peace is built from crumbs." Tyrion grinned sideways, "and sometimes from dragons' toothpicks." He nodded toward Daenerys. A boy climbed her knee to crown her curls with wreath of laurel. She laughed, unfeigned. Later, beneath lantern glow, Arya performed a duel dance with swords wrought of green willow, fainting with graceful arcs. Grey Worm and Unsullied drummed shield rims to time. Even stern Royce tapped boot. Bran looked on serene. The breeze stirred his cloak like seaweed waving in clear tide. Jon drifted to parapet above the sand circle, needing a breath of cool. Daenerys joined him, wreath shifting in her hair. Behind, music faded to hush. "You did more than rescue a child," she murmured. "You rescued hope." He shrugged. "One child is enough." She placed hand over his upon the stone. "I thought I would never say this, but I believe the realm heals." He gazed at her. "You made it possible." She shook her head. Moonlight glittered on lashes. "We, and perhaps that is enough crown for me." He turned to city lights flickering like heaven's reflection. "Let's wear no crowns. Let's be shepherds." She smiled. Tears glinted. "Shepherd queen, I can live with." Below, Aegon stepped from dais to speak with Tyrion, pointing toward a night sky where Regal and Drogon soared in lazy loops. Lanterns floating on heated air drifted upward, each carrying a paper wish from citizens. Some wishes caught tailwinds, rising to brush dragon wings before bursting into sparks. Aegon's voice, pitched low, carried on night breeze. "When dragons ride above wishes, even conquerors may dream." Tyrion tilted head. "And what dream do you hold, Majesty?" Aegon watched lanterns burst into star-like motes. "That a king's name outlives the sword he bears, and that it be spoken with love, not fear." He limped away, cane tapping time to drums. Behind him, smoke from feast braziers curled into sky to mingle with lantern ash. Scents of roasted boar, spiced wine, and cedar. Jon breathed it in, the smell of a realm turning from grief to appetite. Daenerys squeezed his hand. "The song is softer," she whispered. Jon nodded. "But still true." Later, in quiet hours when revelers dozed against casks and dragons perched atop shattered walls surveying moonlit silence, Bran summoned Jon to a rooftop where wind hissed through broken crenels. Arya stood behind her brother, shadows cloaking her features. Bran's eyes were distant stars. "I saw a ripple today," he said. "Beyond stepstones, a fleet massing black sails, red hands painted on canvas. Not ironborn, but one who learned from them." Jon's blood cooled. "Euron's shade." "His nephew Christopher," Arya murmured. "They call him the Red Kraken." Jon exhaled. "Led by Valentine Gold? And fire priests," Bran confirmed. "They seek dragons." Jon looked at moonlit curve of horizon. "We will be ready." Arya slipped out of shadow, eyes bright. "I'll scout their scouts. Slice information from throats if need be." Bran gripped Wheelchair's arms. "Balance the blade, sister. The world mends slowly." Arya tipped an unseen hat. "Slow as I allow." Jon touched her shoulder. "Come morning, we plan at dawn watch." She vanished into night. Bran's gaze lingered. "The world tests mercy. Do not let mercy break." Jon squeezed his brother's thin hand. "Nor will I let fear sharpen mercy into vengeance." He departed, cloak snapping like a banner in high wind. Weeks slid into months. Rains swept from Sea of Dorne, drenching fresh-sown grain. Fields outside King's Landing sprouted green where black ash once choked soil. Sansa returned north to harvest, leaving Lord Royce as Vale envoy. Tyrion brokered a pact with Bravos. Loan forgiveness tied to trade in Dornish glass. Daenerys traveled to Dragonstone to oversee mine reopening. Cave paintings there whispered of older breeds of dragon beyond Evenfall. Aegon, accompanied by Grey Worm, toured Stormland's villages, offering aid and gleaning whispers of the Red Kraken. Jon remained in capital, forging watchtowers on cliffs. By torchlight he drafted new code of justice with Maester Wolkan. Trial by witness, not champion. Freedoms for thrallborn, tax remission for widows. Some lords grumbled, but small folk thronged the plaza to hear proclamations read, and he knew their hearts counted too. At times he stood on ramparts at night, listening to distant tide and think of quieter days. Yet he never felt alone. Rhaegal's silhouette soared above, and somewhere beyond roofs, Daenerys's laughter drifted across still air like chimes. One morning a raven beat wings against Bran's open window. Its message bore Stepstone's wax seal. Lord Tolos of Beetling Key offered secret harboring of Red Kraken's galleys in exchange for Triarchy's favor. Bran summoned council. They debated. Decision made. A silent knight bearing spearpoint of dragonglass and wearing no sigil would infiltrate Stepstones. Arya, of course. Jon objected until she showed sly grin and vanished for a moon. Dragons molted old scales, revealing brighter plates beneath. Balyrion's wound scarred into silvered ridge. Merryx's tired wings regrew fresh membrane. Vagar's roar softened but deepened. Aegon studied them from balconies, sometimes stroking Balyrion's chin like a father humbling himself before age. On Midsummer's Eve, city bells hung anew, recast from cracked bronze and iron bound in Valyrian steel shavings. The Triarchy decreed they would ring only at births, not wars. When the first new bell tolled at dusk for a baker's newborn, all work halted. Jon, Daenerys, and Aegon met each other's eyes across courtyard, and without speaking, each felt the shift of epoch. 3 moons after the feast, raven-red dawn painted the city. Jon awoke to trumpets. He found Davos on rampart, spyglass leveled south. "Sails on horizon," Davos said, voice taut. "Black, red hands. stepstones fleet. He offered glass. Jon saw triangular sails, black dye glimmering oily, a crimson sigil indeed a kraken's reach with fingers of flame. No more than 20 galleys, but lean and swift. War drums faint on wind. He lowered glass. Sound dragons. Drums of their own thundered soon. Balerian's wings beating sky, Drogon and Regal rising. Jon leapt to Regal's saddle, heart steady. Aegon aboard Balerion, Daenerys on Drogon, all three climbing azure. Galleys broke formation at sight, some turning, others loosing firepots on catapults. Diminutive flares that winked useless against altitude. The dragons circled, but this time they did not unleash ruin. Instead they angled lower and drove wind ahead of them, turbulence churning sea into froth. Waves hammered hulls. Masts cracked. Panic overcame crews. Some leapt. Others struck colored sails and raised white cloth. Aegon's voice carried above roar. Bend or burn! 10 ships lowered flags. 5 pressed on. 5 turned to flee. Daenerys directed Drogon, flaming the sea ahead of fleeing. A wall of steam. They struck and foundered. Jon herded surrendered galleys toward Blackwater mouth where unsullied longboats waited. At dusk captives tied on quays. Among them, the Red Kraken himself. Christopher sighted by his beard braided with coral wire. Arya emerged from hold of his flagship, cloak soaked, dagger crimson. She'd slit half the captain's circle in cabin before dawn. Triarchy convened on dock. Some urged execution. Aegon remained silent, studying Christopher's wild eyes.
Danenreis met Jon's Kees.
He spoke. We stand by mercy unless spurned. He drew Longclaw, set its point under Christopher's throat. Swear fealty. Dismantle your fleet. Serve rebuilding for 5 years. Or bleed now. The Red Kraken spat but looked at dragons perched upon towers, and his courage died. He knelt. Thus Volantis' plot unraveled. Triarchy's mercy forged new vassals from drifting knives. Years passed, not without storms, nor blood, but with a pattern of trial and grace repeated like heartbeat. The city healed. The land flourished. Snow returned each winter, but people met it with full larders and warm roofs. Regal's brood hatched 2 eggs, hatchlings named Snowwing and Dawnfire. Drogon fathered a midnight blue WYRM called Nightwind. Balerion did not sire again, but stood guardian over the fledglings, old eyes watchful. Cersei's child, a girl with dark curls, grew at Storm's End, naming Gendry uncle. She rode ponies along bluffs, unaware of politics swirling far. Cersei herself, freed to Lys under escort after birth, lived quietly. Her letters reached Tyrion twice a year, each shorter than the last. When the lords gathered 5 years on to decide whether Triarchy would dissolve, they found they could not part the 3 rulers. Petitioners argued for singular crown, but small folk lit candles at the September's rebuilt steps, praying for the 3 to remain. In the end, charter extended, for as long as the people of Westeros shall will it. No crown forged, no iron seat re-inhabited. The realm settled for 3 thrones of carved weirwood, ash, and rowan, set side by side. One afternoon, dove priests from Summer Isles visited, awed by dragons. They gifted a tapestry depicting 3-headed Hydra entwined with a dire wolf and olive branch. It hung in the throne chamber, reminder that some beasts need not devour each other to rule. Jon sometimes rode north to Winterfell, where Arya trained squires in silent footwork and Sansa governed harvest fairs. He'd bring Daenerys gillyflowers and return with northern snow crystals in his beard, which she'd shake out laughing by hearth. Aegon took to wandering libraries, writing treatises on dragon lineage. When Sam published Chronicle of the Long Night's End, it carried co-author credits. Samwell Tarly, Queen Daenerys Stormborn, King Aegon the Conqueror returned, and Lord Commander Jon Snow. Scholars debated which name shone brightest. Small folk simply called it the Book of Mercy. On the 20th anniversary of the Night King's fall, bells rang again. Birth of Gendry's firstborn with Lady Lavenna Page. The Triarchy attended naming feast under lanterns. Bran's ravens perched overhead like black garlands. Snowwing and Dawnfire circled above, smaller than elders, but magnificent. Children pointed skyward. Old men wept quiet tears, remembering fear turned to wonder. As moon climbed, Jon felt weight of years, but light too. He tipped goblet to Daenerys at his side, to Aegon across table, to Bran smiling faintly near hearth. Fire crackled. Outside, dragons folded wings over sleeping city. Jon thought of the dream of the wall melting, of reflections sliding into dark water. Now he saw the dark water stilled, the pieces gathered, reformed in new patterns of light. He lifted goblet high. To mercy, he said. Goblets clinked. The hall exhaled warmth. Wind beyond windows carried no ash, only salt and distant gull cries. And though wars would come again, as wars always do, in that moment the realm beat with one pulse. A song deep and soft and true, echoing through stone and sky and bone. Mercy is strength. Mercy is life. And life, once kindled, burns brighter than any dragon fire. The midday sun cast gilded spears upon the freshly whitewashed towers of King's Landing, glazing every angled roofline with heat, turning the skeins of washing strung between rebuilt tenements into banners of wavering color. Merchants' bells pealed from the street of silk to the Dragon Gate, not in alarm, but in a synchrony that proclaimed markets open and larders full. In the harbor below, ships with hulls painted cerulean, crimson, and deep summer isles ebony jostled for birthrights to the new quays. Quays rebuilt of storm-felled cedars from Tarth, pocketed with iron bolts forged in the smithies of Winterfell and oiled by Dornish olives. The scent that drifted along the docks was no longer smoke and suet but saffron, lanolin, and salt. Jon Snow surveyed the vista from the topmost parapet of Maegor's Holdfast. The vantage still felt strange. He had spent half his life staring northward at horizons too bleak to promise such quiet industry. Yet here, the city lay like an enormous beehive, humming contentedly. His hair, threaded with silver that had arrived early, frost-kissed, Sansa had teased, shifted in the warm wind. He inhaled. The breeze smelled of civet, pepper, and tar. Alive. Alive and worth safeguarding. Rhaegal's rush of wings shattered the moment's hush. The dragon banked low over the bay, the sunlight flaring on fresh-grown scales near the shoulder where scorpion iron once scarred him. Two younger shapes hurtled after. The adolescent Dawnfire swept past her sire with a squeal of challenge, while Snowwing lagged behind, wings beating in lopsided spurts that betrayed his youth. The commotion set gulls screaming. Dockworkers cheered, pointing skyward. Brienne's sandaled footfalls rang up the stair behind him. She surfaced on the crenel with a brisk salute. "The River Council has arrived, Your Grace." Jon braced himself. He still disliked the honorific, though 5 years had softened its weight. "Ser Tytos Blackwood, Lady Mallister, they await in the Ember Hall." Jon thanked her, but before they could leave a distant rumble reached their ears, rolling across the city like muted thunder. Brienne's hand went to her longsword. Jon's eyes snapped to the north edge of Blackwater Bay, where the peninsula curved into the open sea. Smoke geysered from somewhere beyond Davos's recently completed lighthouse. Jon's heart stuttered. "Driftmark watchtowers?" Brienne asked. A second plume blossomed, this one incandescent green before the color dissipated into black. Wildfire. Rhaegal, in mid-arc, screamed and veered toward the disturbance. Jon seized the horn from the inner wall, an alarm seldom sounded, and blew 3 long blasts, signifying draconic response and coastal alert. Bells answered from the gatehouses. The restful drone of the city pivoted in an eye blink to purposeful motion. Soldiers spilled from barracks, the unsullied spear columns curving south in a pale blue river. Jon swung off the parapet and took the stairs 3 at a time. Halfway down he met Daenerys in the gallery of the Velvet Walk. She strode barefoot, skirts slapped by her haste, a coral comb still half-clasped in her hair as though she had fled her dressing mirror. Wildfire at the bay? She did not wait for confirmation. Together they ran to the practice yard where Drogon lounged beneath a knotted elm. He sensed their urgency, rising before commands passed her lips. Aegon emerged from the stables girded in dark mail, black fire belted over a crimson surcoat. Balerian's roar rattled stanchions as the ancient beast finished his breakfast of roasted aurochs and padded toward the cliff edge. Missandei, eyes wide, slid parchments under her arm and joined Grey Worm, who had the Unsullied arranged in serried ranks. Jon vaulted into Rhaegal's saddle. The straps tugged at his shoulders as the dragon beat upward into a bank of hot air. From this altitude the disaster revealed itself. 3 galleys lay afire in the main channel, sails collapsed. Green wildfire licked their decks. But that alone did not stir the alarms. Beyond, a heavier ship, ox-browed, high-prowed, fought upstream bearing a prow coated in gleaming metal. Scorpions 24 from stem to stern. Over those, scarlet sails painted with a lidless eye. Euron's nephew had been jailed. The Red Kraken's rump fleets scuttled. This was something older, something whispered in Saltryme taverns. A legend. Below, train towers crumpled as hidden catapults loosed heavy chains strung between anchored punts. The chains burst from the water, entangling Dawnfire's legs in mid-dive. Jon's heart lurched. Dawnfire shrieked, plummeted, regained purchase only to tilt sideways, one wing clipped by rope weighted in tar. The young dragon flailed above the waves. Rhaegal roared paternal fury and dove. On deck of the mystery ship, rows of armored figures raised maces tipped with jade flame. A flaming pot arced skyward, aimed not at the city but at Dawnfire. Jon clung to Rhaegal's spine. They intercepted, Rhaegal's belly scraping mastheads as he half-rolled to position. Fire burst around them, blue heat, not green. Spell fire. Jon glimpsed runes shimmering along the maces. Magi, Carcosa, Valyrian. The flames slithered up Rhaegal's flank but did not ignite. The scales glowed, flared, then shrugged the magic away. Yet the blast's concussion tossed Jon sideways. His harness held, but pain lanced through his shoulder. Aegon's bellow echoed as Balerion stooped like a black star. The old dragon unleashed a torrent of black-red flame, but it struck an invisible barrier, a shimmering globe that flickered around the enemy ship. The fire split and poured aside, frying the water to steam. Daenerys circled, Drogon unleashing wind hurricanes to scatter the enemy's flaming maces. She shouted down in high Valyrian challenge and warning. Her voice, amplified by dragon echo, trembled the air. Yet the ship's crew held formation. A robed figure at the prow raised a crystal staff. Its facets reflected 3 dragons and the glint of wildfire. Jon urged Rhaegal toward Dawnfire, hacking at chains with dragonglass hatchet gifted by Arya. Each strike sent shocks up his arms, but one chain snapped. Dawnfire regained lift, blood streaking a torn wing membrane. Jon signaled for the juvenile to retreat to city airspace. Up coast, 3 more galleys slid from behind the cape, sails identical, hulls sheathed in half-moon plates of obsidian and steel. Tyrion's new harbor scorpions swiveled.
Bolt 100.
Some pierced plating, others ricocheted. One hull cracked, listing. A cheer rose from bastions. Yet at that moment, seawater beneath the lead ship heaved. A serpentine neck emerged, scaled in deep indigo, eyes phosphorescent. A sea dragon, smaller than the myths of the far reaches, but monstrous by any reckoning. The creature butted the crippled galley, riding it, bellowing an ululating challenge. Panic swept the dock front. Jon reckoned numbers. Dawnfire maimed, Snowwing inexperienced. 3 elder dragons could meet CWYRM and Magi galleys, but the city's new fleet anchored inside the mouth risked crossfire. He wheeled Rhaegal back to the palace courtyard and dropped onto the wide landing plinth where Tyrion already directed artillery. Need to seal the channel, Tyrion shouted over Din. If they breach, wildfire spreads all the way to the dock granaries. Jon's mind raced. The chain boom, he asked. Not yet mounted, Tyrion said. But we have the harbor gate caissons. Jon gripped his friend's arm. Sink them. Tyrion's eyes widened. That'll bottle our ships inside. Better trapped than burned. Jon turned to the unsullied trumpeter. Blow retreat for cogs. Caissons down. Across the bay, Davos's distant pennon acknowledged. Jon resumed sky. Daenerys swooped beside him. The barrier around their flagship, sorcery. We must break the focus. Aegon draws their fire. Jon pointed to Prow Mage. Staff. If I land on their deck. Too heavily guarded. She hesitated. But 2 dragons can shatter shield with coordinated breath. Valyrian overshoots broadside. Drogon and Regal strike heart. He met her eyes. We do this together. They climbed toward Valyrian's altitude. Aegon spotted them, nodded grim assent. On signal, Drogon folded wings, stooped. Regal followed, wingtips nearly brushing. Valyrian roared, a basso nullifying thunder. Pattern drilled by months of training. Valyrian's flame first, a wide curtain. Shield brightened. Drogon next, hotter, narrower, forcing shield to contract. Regal final, a piercing ray of molten white straight for the staff. The impact flared brighter than dawn. Staff shattered. The mage flew backward. Shield collapsed. Seconds later, harbor scorpions, newly calibrated, loosed storm of bolts. The flagship's armored plates cracked like eggshell. Wildfire below decks ignited. The ship burst in hummingbird green blossom. Shockwave rattled city windows but left dragons unbowed. Sea dragon thrashed, injured by debris. Aegon guided Valyrian into a corkscrew dive. Claws extended. They seized the sea beast behind skull crest and heaved skyward, twisting until its spine audibly snapped. Carcass hit water like felled tower, sending waves spraying onto quays. Remaining galleys broke, some capsized in their own panicked turns. Meanwhile, Davos's caissons, huge stone-filled barges, had been released from chains and now churned downward into the main channel, sealing the harbor mouth. The enemy vessels outside were cut off from retreat toward the bay. Crosswinds blew the fires back onto them. Sailcloth flared. Masts crumpled. Within minutes, the sea battle was done. Survivors clung to planks, screaming for mercy. The city answered with small boats and ropes. No quarter spared, only for those still armed. On ramparts, bells remained silent. These bells rang only for life, but cheers spread from tower to alley. Small folk raised cups. Children ran onto beaches, picking iridescent splinters of mage crystals washed ashore like blessings. Later, in the Ember Hall, Triarchy met, soot-streaked but victorious. Aegon tossed a shard of broken staff onto table. It still pulsed faint blue. Valyrian runework, he said. North of Ashai such things are forged. Bran's fingers brushed it. His eyes clouded, inner vision drifting. An old power stirs, he murmured. West of Great Shadow, it seeks to test dragons, measure mercy. This was but finger of hand. Daenerys stiffened. We cannot chase shadows across oceans. Nor can we ignore, Jon said. He circled table. We prepare harbor fortifications, double scorpions, triple warding spells, and we send envoys to Volantis. Make clear we know of their meddling. Sansa, face resolved, added. And we show small folk that threat met with unity becomes triumph. Tyrion chuckled dryly. A new festival, then? We'll call it the Day of Broken Chains. They laughed, exhaustion, relief, but Tyrion already made notes for bakers, brewers, minstrels. He would wring cheer from ashes. Jon left council at moonset, climbing to the same parapet from morning. City rested now under starlit hush. Regal perched on spire, eyelids half-closed yet ale. Jon leaned against cold stone. Daenerys joined him, dragonglass shard in hand. Your shoulder, she asked. He flexed. Will mend. She pressed the shard into his palm. It had cooled. Blue glow gone. Keep. Reminder that old worlds tug at new. We can't be guardians only to the realm, but to what the realm may become. He turned shard in fingers. Then we teach it mercy before fear finds roots. She laid head to his shoulder. Below, lanterns on the docks flickered like low constellations. Beyond the sealed channel, tide lapped at stone, patient, as if rewriting new shoreline stories. Autumn's first gale rattled shutters of the river holdfast of Harrenhal. sending eddies of dried leaves swirling across its weed-choked courtyards. No feasts here, no reforged bells. Only creaks, the hush of old curses, and a single hooded rider dismounting beneath the fractured skull gate. Arya Stark slipped her horse's reins around a rusted torch bracket, then moved cat-quiet into the broken main keep. She inhaled dust, moss, and the faint scent of forge soot, recent, though the castle's hearths had been dead for years. She descended stairs by memory until a corridor opened into the melted stone vault her father once described. Torchlight flickered within. She crouched, ghosting forward. In the vault, 7 figures stood around a crude table. Robes of many colors draped shoulders. Amber, scarlet, smoke gray. At the head, a woman in cloth dyed the color of dried blood pressed a hand to a brazier. Flame brightened, revealing her face. Lyra of the Shadowed Vale, priestess of R'hllor, rumored architect of the Mage Barrages. Arya's pulse thrummed. She crept closer, pressing into alcove gloom. Loss at Blackwater was foreseen. Lyra told the gathering, voice like small bells. The test measured the dragon's unity. Next, we pry them apart. A robed man scoffed. Dragons cling to wolves, queen to conqueror. How sever bonds? Lyra's eyes glittered. By offering each a mirror of weakness. Aegon fears irrelevance. Daenerys the specter of tyranny. Jon the fragility of mercy. We send them each a gift. She lifted 3 reliquaries carved of oily black stone. In these lie seeds of choice. Arya's hand inched toward dagger. Then a hint of breath on her nape froze her. Another figure, masked, had circled behind. Steel whispered from scabbard.
Arya spoon, parin.
Metal kissed sparks. She flipped backward as blaze and brazier flared bright emerald. Alarm rasped in tongues unknown. The cloaked assembly scattered, some hurling shards that exploded in flashes of light, others drawing curved knives. Arya rolled beneath a table, vaulted over collapsing bench, and sprinted for corridor entrance. Footsteps pounded pursuit. She ducked a slash, hamstrung her assailant, kept moving. Beyond archway, she skidded to halt. 3 more figures blocked exit, blades crossways. She whispered the prayer of shadows, swung dragonglass staff. The first fell with gurgle, second staggered back. Third hurled a vial, glass bursting into choking smoke. Arya darted sideways, grabbed pillar, swung into window space where vines curtained the drop to yard. She leapt, landed on ivy-cushioned rubble, rolled, found feet. Hooves clattered, reinforcements. She sprinted for her horse. A crossbow quarrel thunked into post by her ear. She vaulted into saddle, heels dug. Horse surged through Skull Gate. Behind, torches flickered along battlements. She did not slow until the first stars silvered around full autumn moon. Only then did she check saddlebags. No reliquaries, but one had fallen onto her cloak during scuffle. A black stone oval, warm. She held it to starlight. Inside, a swirl like frozen fire. She breathed. A gift, then, and wheeled north toward the river road. At council a week later, Arya placed the relic before the 3. Bran touched it, recoiled. Shadowglass, forged in heart of a volcano beyond the Jade Gates. Opens minds to whispers if broken over flame. Tyrion hummed. Drug of suggestion. Daenerys stared at swirling core. Or a dream trap. Aegon glared. Burn it. Jon rested hand atop.
No.
Better to study. No enemy tools. Sansa nodded. Knowledge breaks spells. They tasked Sam and Maester Wolkan to analyze the relic in Citadel labs sealed by runes. Arya returned to Harrenhal, finding the stronghold abandoned. Yet grooves in dust betrayed crates dragged toward God's Eye. Whispers spoke of moonlit barges carrying robed silhouettes across its glassy surface toward Isle of Faces. The War of Mercy had entered new field. One of shadows, dreams, whispers beneath leaves older than kings. Nights grew longer. Bran's ravens fretted. In dreams he saw faces beneath weirwood roots, stirring. One eve, Jon dreamt of direwolves chasing dragons across ice fields. Each time a dragon turned to share warmth, the wolves evaporated, leaving snow. He woke unsettled, found Daenerys likewise restless. They spoke until dawn of fears and futures, hands clasped. Resolve rekindled. Next day, Triarchy drafted Edict of Roots. Every child in the realm would learn letters, numbers, and history by 10th name day, funded by grain tithes. Tyrion predicted noble protest. Protests came, but small folk built schools in stable lofts, septs, shipholds. Knowledge seeds planted. Through winter gales, dragons guarded shipping lanes. Black sails dared not return. Caravans rolled north with oranges, south with furs. On quiet days, Aegon wrote poems in Valyrian about stars he'd seen in other ages. Missandei translated them. Scribes copied for libraries. People recited them in marketplaces. Unaware, they praised mercy disguised as flame. Spring equinox rose with comet streaking violet over the stepstones. Bran sensed balance tipping. He called Triarchy to hidden glade outside Kingswood. There, roots of an orphan weirwood curled over limestone outcrops. He spoke. The children stir. Change looms west, Iron Islands, sunset sea. Song of storm and ember. Daenerys placed palm to bark, felt pulse. Then we sail. Jon answered. We sail. Aegon smiled faintly. Conquerors to explorers. Sansa, never comfortable off land, nonetheless planned supply routes. Tyrion pondered instruments for star navigation. Davos polished sextant. Arya packed throwing knives and blank maps. Grey Worm drilled unsullied marines. On midsummer morning they launched from dock rebuilt thrice over, aboard 3 great carracks. Dawnfire's Wing, Mercy's Oath, and Tidewolf. Dragon's Sword escort. Small folk lined quays. Bells rang not for war, but for voyage into unknown. As sails filled, Jon stood at prow beside Daenerys and Aegon, wind whipping cloaks. What lies beyond? She asked quietly. Jon traced horizon line. A place to test mercy anew. Aegon gripped rail, eyes bright. And where songs yet unwritten await. Behind, city bells faded, replaced by gull cries and surf sigh. Dragons wheeled overhead like living constellations. On shore, children chased their shadows, weaving stories to carry across generations. And so they sailed, wolf, dragon, conqueror, on seas uncharted, bearing gifts of grain, scroll, flame restrained, carrying the hope that when at last they returned, the realm they'd leave behind would be one that no shadow could seduce, no blade undo. A realm whose heart beat, unfaltering, in the measured cadence of mercy.